Hello, my weary friends. I'm Sleepy War Doctor, and welcome back to another journey into history. Tonight, we're traveling to the humid jungles and rocky battlefields of the Pacific during the final months of the Second World War. Our story isn't about famous generals, legendary battleships, or daring fighter pilots. Instead, it's about one of the most dangerous and least understood jobs ever assigned to an ordinary soldier. Tonight, you become a flamethrower operator. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Leave a comment telling me your city, your country, and what time it is there right now. I always enjoy seeing where these stories travel as people around the world slowly drift off to sleep. Now, dim the lights. Pull your blanket a little closer. Take one slow, deep breath, and let's quietly step back into history. You don't remember volunteering for this job. You remember volunteering for the army. Or perhaps volunteering isn't quite the right word. The war had reached into nearly every American town. Posters covered brick walls. Newspapers carried photographs of distant islands with unfamiliar names. Families hung blue stars in their windows, hoping they would never become gold. Like thousands of other young men, you found yourself wearing an olive-drab uniform before you had truly imagined what war looked like. At first, military life seemed surprisingly ordinary. There were endless inspections, boots that never seemed clean enough, uniforms that somehow became dirty within minutes of being pressed. There were marches that felt twice as long under the tropical sun. There were rifles to clean, barracks to sweep, equipment to organize. Waiting, always waiting. Military life, you quickly discovered, consisted mostly of waiting for someone important enough to tell you what to do next. You weren't the loudest soldier in your platoon. You weren't constantly joking like some of the others. Nor were you the type to complain. You simply listened, worked, followed instructions, finished whatever task appeared in front of you. Most days, hardly anyone noticed you. At the time, that felt like a blessing. Invisible soldiers rarely found themselves in trouble. Invisible soldiers weren't chosen to demonstrate drills in front of officers. Invisible soldiers escaped unwanted attention. Or so you believed. One unusually hot afternoon in the spring of 1945, everything changed. You were eating lunch beneath a canvas awning. Powdered eggs, a slice of bread, coffee that somehow tasted both burnt and watered down. You had barely finished your second bite when an officer appeared nearby. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't angry. He simply walked through the rows of soldiers with a clipboard tucked beneath one arm. Occasionally he stopped, looked down, made a note, continued walking. Then, he stopped beside you. There was something unsettling about being singled out in such a quiet voice. You stood immediately. The officer nodded toward a dirt path leading away from camp. Come with me. No explanation followed. No congratulations. No warning. Just those 3 words. Come with me. You followed several steps behind, boots crunching softly against dry earth. The afternoon insects buzzed loudly in the surrounding jungle. Somewhere nearby, an engine struggled to start before finally coughing to life. Apart from that, silence. The officer never looked back to see whether you were following. He simply assumed you would. And of course, you did. After several minutes, the path ended at a small tent standing alone beneath several palm trees. Unlike the larger command tents, this one carried no markings, no flag, no sign, no indication of what happened inside. The officer lifted the canvas flap. Inside stood only a wooden table, 2 folding chairs, and a large wooden crate resting quietly in one corner. The crate immediately caught your attention, not because of its size, but because of its smell. Even before you reached it, the air carried a faint odor of gasoline mixed with machine oil, an unpleasant scent, sharp, heavy, the sort of smell that lingered inside your nose long after leaving. The officer sat down. You remained standing until instructed otherwise. Finally, he gestured toward the chair opposite him. Sit. You obeyed. For several seconds neither of you spoke. The only sound came from a ceiling fan lazily turning overhead. It wasn't doing much, mostly moving warm air from one side of the tent to the other. Eventually, the officer opened a folder. He scanned a page, then looked at you for the first time. Your commanding sergeant says you're dependable. You weren't sure whether that required an answer, so you simply nodded. He says you follow orders. Another nod. He says you don't panic. You thought about that for a moment. Truthfully, you had never been given much reason to panic. Training exercises weren't exactly terrifying. Neither were inspections. You nodded once again. The officer closed the folder. Good. He leaned back slightly. We're looking for men exactly like you. Most people enjoy hearing those words. You didn't. Something about them made your stomach tighten. Because armies rarely searched for dependable soldiers unless they needed someone to perform an unpleasant task. The officer stood, walked toward the wooden crate, placed one hand upon its lid. Open it. You hesitated only briefly before lifting the heavy lid. Inside rested several large metal cylinders connected by thick rubber hoses. Straps, valves, pressure gauges, a long metal nozzle. At first, it looked almost like a strange backpack assembled by a plumber. Then recognition struck. You had seen photographs before. You had heard whispers among other soldiers. This wasn't simply equipment. It was an M2 flamethrower, the weapon everyone hoped they would never have to carry. The officer watched your expression carefully. You know what it is. It wasn't a question. You nodded slowly. Yes, sir. He rested both hands behind his back. As of today, he paused. So will everyone else. The words settled over the room with uncomfortable weight. You looked back at the machine inside the crate. Up close, it seemed both impressive and unsettling. 2 fuel tanks, steel fittings, heavy canvas harnesses, thick hoses designed to carry burning fuel toward whatever unfortunate target waited ahead. You had expected something larger. Somehow, that made it worse. The officer continued speaking. You'll begin familiarization tomorrow morning. He spoke as casually as though assigning someone to drive a truck. There'll be maintenance instruction, safety procedures, operation drills, field exercises. He closed the crate again. You'll carry this into combat. Not someone. Not operators. Not the unit. You. For a brief moment, you considered asking why. Why you? Why not someone stronger? Someone taller? Someone with engineering experience? Someone who had actually requested the assignment? But military life had already taught you an important lesson. Sometimes, the army answered questions. Most of the time, it simply expected obedience. And so, you remained silent. The officer seemed pleased. He gave one short nod. Report at first light. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added something that stayed with you long after leaving the tent. The weapon is dangerous. He paused. But remember, he looked directly into your eyes. It's even more dangerous to the man carrying it. Outside, the afternoon sunlight suddenly felt brighter than before. The camp looked exactly as it had an hour earlier. Soldiers laughed. Mechanics repaired trucks. Someone practiced harmonica beneath a tree. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. Because while everyone else carried rifles, tomorrow, you would begin learning how to carry fire itself. Sleep doesn't come easily that night. Not because of artillery. Not because of mosquitoes. Not even because of the tropical heat that settles over the camp like a damp blanket. It's because your thoughts keep returning to the crate. Somewhere across the compound, sitting inside a locked storage tent, waits a machine designed for one purpose: to throw fire farther than any man naturally could. You lie on your cot, staring at the canvas ceiling. Rain begins softly. Tiny drops tap against the fabric overhead in an oddly comforting rhythm. Nearby, someone snores loudly enough to shake the wooden bunk. Another soldier quietly writes a letter home by flashlight, stopping every few moments to think of the right words. You wonder what he writes. Dear Mom, the food is fine. The weather is hot. I miss home. You almost laugh. How exactly would you describe tomorrow? Dear Mom, Today, the Army decided my job is carrying nearly 70 pounds of gasoline on my back while everyone shoots at me. No, some things simply don't belong inside letters. You eventually drift into an uneasy sleep. A whistle cuts through the darkness. You wake before sunrise. The sky outside remains deep blue, with only the faintest hint of orange beginning to appear beyond the trees. The air is already warm. Your uniform feels damp before you've even put it on. Breakfast is quick. Powdered eggs, toast, coffee that tastes slightly better today, or perhaps you're simply too distracted to notice. Nobody at your table knows about your reassignment. At least, not yet. You finish eating and quietly leave camp. The training area lies several hundred yards away. Unlike the rifle range, there are very few people here. Only 4 soldiers stand waiting outside a large, open-sided shed. None of them look particularly excited. They glance at one another briefly before looking away again. You recognize one face from basic training. His name might be Charlie or Charles. You're honestly not certain. He gives you a small nod. Guess we're all here for the same thing. It's the first sentence anyone has spoken all morning. You nod back. I suppose so. Neither of you says anything else. Some conversations don't need continuing. A few minutes later, an older staff sergeant walks into the shed. He doesn't shout for attention. He doesn't need to. His face carries the kind of expression only someone with years of combat experience seems able to wear. Not angry, not friendly, simply tired. Morning. Nobody answers. He seems perfectly happy with that. Behind him, several flamethrowers rest neatly against a wooden rack. Seeing one inside a crate yesterday had been unsettling enough. Seeing 6 together somehow feels even stranger. The sergeant walks over to one of them. He lifts it with both hands. The effort is obvious. Even empty, the weapon weighs far more than an ordinary rifle. He sets it onto a table. This. He taps one of the steel cylinders. Is your backpack? A few nervous smiles appear. He doesn't smile back. You'll stop thinking it's funny after about 15 minutes. Silence returns. He points toward the twin tanks. Empty. He knocks against one with his knuckles. Holds fuel. Then the second. Compressed nitrogen. His hand moves to the hose. This carries everything forward. Finally, he grips the nozzle. And this. He pauses. Is where history gets unpleasant. No one laughs. The sergeant seems almost relieved. I've taught enough classes to know jokes disappear after the first week. He begins dismantling the weapon piece by piece. Every valve, every hose, every fitting, each part has a purpose. Each part has to function perfectly. Because if even one small seal fails, the consequences aren't measured in broken machinery. They're measured in human lives. He explains the ignition system, the pressure valves, the fuel mixture, the safety catch, how to clean the nozzle, how to inspect cracked hoses, how to replace worn seals. For nearly 2 hours, nobody touches the weapon. You simply watch, listen, take notes. The flamethrower begins to look less like a terrifying monster and more like an extremely complicated piece of plumbing, which somehow makes it even scarier. Machines don't care who's operating them. They simply obey physics. Eventually, the sergeant folds his notebook closed. Questions. One young private slowly raises his hand. What happens if? He hesitates. The tank gets hit. The entire shed becomes silent. The instructor studies him for several seconds. Finally, it depends. Nobody enjoys that answer. If it's a small puncture, he shrugs. You lose pressure. If it's worse, another shrug. You probably won't have much time to worry about it. Silence. One soldier nervously clears his throat. Another shifts his weight from one foot to the other. The sergeant notices. Forget what you've seen in Hollywood. He taps the steel tank again. These don't explode every time somebody sneezes near them. A few relieved expressions appear. But, he continues, they're still carrying enough fuel to make everyone around you have a very bad day. The relief disappears. That's why your squad protects you. He pauses. And why you never He points directly at each of you in turn. Ever. Another pause. Walk alone. The practical exercises begin after lunch. Today there is no fuel, no fire, only empty training equipment. The instructor demonstrates how to lift the backpack. It immediately becomes obvious why two soldiers often help one operator. The full combat weight approaches 70 pounds, nearly 32 kilograms. The instructor turns toward your group. Who wants to go first? Nobody volunteers. He expected that. You. His finger lands squarely on your chest. You step forward. Two assistants lift the heavy harness. They settle it carefully onto your shoulders. The weight surprises you immediately. Not because it's painful, because it changes everything. Your posture, your balance, even breathing feels slightly different. You instinctively lean forward. The instructor nods. Everyone does. You take one careful step, then another. The tanks sway slightly behind your back. Not much, just enough to remind you they're there. The straps creak softly. The metal shifts. Every movement feels deliberate. You suddenly understand something. This weapon isn't simply carried. It carries you. The instructor places the long nozzle into your hands. Now walk. You begin moving across the training yard. Slowly, very slowly. Not because you're weak, because rushing would almost certainly make you lose your balance. After 50 yards, sweat already runs down your neck. After 100, your shoulders begin aching. The instructor walks beside you. You'll get stronger. You hope he's right, because right now, it feels less like carrying equipment, and more like carrying another human being on your back. When the exercise finally ends, two assistants remove the harness. The sudden absence of weight almost sends you stumbling backward. Your spine feels strangely light. Your shoulders continue aching long after the steel tanks are gone. The instructor watches your reaction. That's normal. He folds his arms. In a week, you won't even notice it. He thinks for a moment. Well, you'll always notice it. You'll just stop complaining. The rest of the afternoon is spent repeating the same movements. Lift. Walk. Kneel. Stand. Turn carefully. Never too quickly. Always aware of the long nozzle extending several feet ahead. Every movement becomes slower, more deliberate. By sunset, your uniform is soaked with sweat. Your shoulders burn. Your lower back aches. And you've never fired a single drop of fuel. As you walk back toward camp, Charlie catches up beside you. What do you think? You consider the question. Finally, I think rifles suddenly seem much lighter. Charlie laughs quietly. So do I. For the first time all day, someone smiles. It doesn't last long, because sitting just beyond the edge of camp, waiting for tomorrow, are 6 steel backpacks. Patiently waiting for the day they're no longer empty. By the third morning, your shoulders already know what is about to happen. Even before the instructors wheel the equipment onto the range, the muscles across your back begin to ache as if they remember yesterday's burden all on their own. It is a strange thing, how quickly the human body learns. The tropical air hangs perfectly still. Not a single leaf moves in the trees surrounding the training ground. The instructors seem pleased. No wind, one remarks. Good day for your first live exercise. The words send a quiet ripple through the group. Live exercise. Until now, every movement has been practiced with empty tanks, empty hoses, an empty nozzle. Today, the tanks will finally be filled. A truck rumbles slowly into the clearing, carrying several large steel drums. Even before it stops, you smell them. Gasoline, thickened fuel, machine oil. The sharp odor spreads through the humid air until it seems impossible to breathe anything else. One by one, the instructors begin filling the tanks. You watch carefully. No one rushes. Every valve is checked twice. Every cap tightened. Every hose inspected again. The sergeant notices you watching. Good. He wipes his hands on an old rag. Never trust the last man who checked your equipment. He points toward the tanks. Trust yourself. The words are simple, but you understand exactly what he means. Out there, nobody will inspect your gear before every battle. Nobody will tighten loose fittings for you. If something fails, you'll likely discover it at the worst possible moment. Your name is called first. Whether that's luck or misfortune, you're no longer sure. Two assistants lift the now-filled flamethrower onto your shoulders. Immediately, you notice the difference. Yesterday had been heavy. Today feels like carrying a steel safe filled with wet sand. The tanks settle against your back with surprising force. The shoulder straps bite through your uniform. You instinctively lean forward. The instructor adjusts one strap. There. Better. A little. He nods. It never feels good. Around you, the other trainees receive their own equipment. Nobody jokes anymore. Yesterday, there had still been nervous smiles, small conversations, awkward laughter. Today, silence has replaced all of it. The firing range sits at the edge of the jungle. Several abandoned concrete bunkers have been built into a hillside specifically for training. They're empty. The instructors made certain of that. Even so, looking at the dark openings makes your stomach tighten. The sergeant walks down the line. When I give the signal, he raises one finger. You ignite. A second finger. You aim. A third. You fire. He looks directly at each trainee. You do not panic. You do not swing the nozzle. You do not hold the trigger longer than instructed. His voice remains calm, almost gentle, as strange as this sounds. The fire isn't the dangerous part. Several recruits glance toward him. It's losing control of the fire. He steps aside. The range falls completely silent. Even the birds seem to have disappeared. The sergeant raises his hand. Pilot lights. One by one, small blue flames appear beneath protective guards near each nozzle. They are surprisingly quiet. Tiny. Almost harmless. You stare at yours. It hardly looks capable of igniting anything. Then you remember what waits inside the tanks resting against your spine. Your breathing becomes noticeably slower. Not because you're relaxed. Because your body seems afraid to move too quickly. The sergeant raises his arm again. Ready. You tighten your grip. The metal nozzle feels warm beneath your gloves. The shoulder straps creak softly. Your heartbeat seems louder than everything else. Fire. You squeeze the trigger. Instead of the enormous explosion you expected, there is only a heavy hiss. Then, a river of bright orange flame surges forward. It pours from the nozzle in one continuous stream, curling through the humid air before crashing into the concrete bunker. The entire entrance disappears behind swirling fire. Heat washes back toward your face almost instantly. Even standing more than 30 feet away, you feel it. Your cheeks grow hot. Your eyebrows tighten instinctively. The instructor shouts over the roar. Count. 1001. 1002. You release the trigger. Immediately, the stream disappears. The bunker continues burning for several more seconds. Flames dance across the concrete before gradually fading. Smoke rises into the morning sky. Nobody speaks. The smell reaches you first. Burning fuel. Hot metal. Scorched concrete. It is a smell unlike anything you've experienced before. Sharp. Oily. It clings to your clothes almost immediately. The instructor walks over. Again. No congratulations. No criticism. Simply, again. The second burst feels easier. The third, more controlled. By the fifth, your hands no longer shake. That realization troubles you. Not because you're becoming better, because you're becoming comfortable. The morning continues with different exercises. Short bursts, longer distances, moving while carrying the loaded tanks, approaching simulated bunkers, retreating without turning your back. Every lesson has one purpose. Survive long enough to complete the mission. During a short break, the instructor gathers everyone beneath a canvas shelter. He places the flamethrower carefully onto a wooden table. Listen carefully. His tone changes. Less instructional. More personal. I've seen operators survive entire campaigns. He pauses. I've also seen operators die on their very first day. Nobody interrupts. The difference usually isn't courage. He points toward the weapon. It's discipline. He slowly walks around the table. This machine rewards calm men. It punishes careless ones. He rests one hand against the steel tank. You'll be frightened. You should be. If you ever stop respecting this weapon. He taps the metal lightly. That's the day it'll kill you. The words linger in everyone's mind long after the lesson ends. That evening, back at camp, something has changed. Not the camp itself. The soldiers still clean rifles. Mechanics still repair trucks. Someone still attempts to play a harmonica that sounds only slightly better than yesterday. But people look at you differently. Word travels quickly in military camps. Someone must have mentioned the flamethrower training. As you carry your dinner tray toward an empty table, conversations briefly pause, only for a moment, then quietly continue. No one says anything rude. No one mocks you. Instead, they simply leave a little more space than before, almost as though the heavy tanks are still strapped to your back, even though they aren't. You sit alone beneath the fading evening sky. The smell of fuel still clings stubbornly to your uniform. You scrub your hands twice before eating. The scent remains. It has worked its way beneath your fingernails, into the fabric of your sleeves, perhaps even into your memory. Charlie eventually walks over carrying his own tray. Without asking permission, he sits beside you. For several minutes, neither of you speaks. Finally, he breaks the silence. You know, he stares toward the sunset. I think everyone expects us to be fearless. You shake your head slowly. I don't think they do. Charlie looks at you. I think they're just glad they aren't carrying what we are. The two of you finish dinner in silence. As darkness settles over the camp, you return to your bunk. Your shoulders ache. Your back aches. Your hands smell faintly of gasoline despite repeated washing. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the training grounds, beyond the jungle, ships are already gathering, preparing to carry thousands of young men toward islands whose names will soon become history. You don't know exactly where you're going yet. Only one thing has become certain. Your training is no longer preparing you for someday. It is preparing you for very soon. The announcement comes 3 days later. Not during training, not during breakfast, not even during morning roll call. Instead, it arrives quietly, almost casually, as if someone were reading tomorrow's weather forecast. Flamethrower operators. The company clerk glances down at his clipboard. Report to headquarters immediately. For names are called, including yours. No one says a word as the small group walks across camp together. The path is familiar now. You recognize the supply tents, the maintenance depot, the rows of olive-drab trucks parked beneath camouflage nets. Everything appears exactly as it did a week ago, yet something feels different. The camp seems busier. Forklifts rumble between warehouses carrying stacks of ammunition. Medical orderlies load crates marked with bright red crosses. Mechanics crawl beneath trucks, tightening bolts one last time before departure. Wherever you look, people are preparing to leave. Inside headquarters, a large map hangs across the wall. Unlike the simple training maps you've grown accustomed to, this one stretches nearly from floor to ceiling. Tiny colored pins cover its surface. Blue, red, yellow. Thin strings connect islands scattered across an enormous ocean. An officer steps forward. Without introduction, he taps one small island near the southern tip of Japan, Okinawa. The room remains silent. Everyone has heard the name. Even before arriving in the Pacific, stories had begun circulating. The largest amphibious invasion of the Pacific War. Thousands of ships. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Fierce resistance. Natural caves carved into limestone hills. Underground tunnels stretching for miles. Hidden bunkers. Fortified positions that artillery often failed to destroy. The officer taps the island again. That's where you're going. Simple. Direct. No dramatic speech. No patriotic slogans. Just 4 words. That's where you're going. He begins explaining the mission. Not your specific mission. Nobody knows that yet. Instead, he explains why flamethrower operators have become increasingly important. He points toward a series of hills marked on the map. The Japanese have spent months preparing defensive positions. He traces a line across the island. Many of these positions aren't visible from the air. Another line. They're built inside caves. Another. Connected by tunnels. He lowers the wooden pointer. You can destroy a bunker with artillery. He shrugs slightly. If you're lucky, you can bomb it. Another shrug. If you're very lucky. He pauses. But eventually, his eyes move across the room. Someone still has to walk up to the entrance. Nobody needs him to explain further. Everyone understands. That someone is usually carrying a flamethrower. The briefing continues for nearly an hour. Maps, photographs, reconnaissance reports, estimated troop movements, supply schedules. You absorb as much information as possible, not because you expect to remember every detail, because knowing something feels better than knowing nothing. Eventually, the officer dismisses everyone. As you leave, an older captain quietly stops you. You turn. Sir. He studies you for a moment. You've completed your training. Yes, sir. He nods slowly. Remember something. You wait. The flamethrower isn't your greatest burden. You glance instinctively toward the equipment sheds. The greatest burden, he says quietly, is deciding when to use it. For several seconds, neither of you speaks. Then he simply walks away, leaving you alone with words that somehow weigh more than the weapon itself. The following morning, your squad assignment arrives. You've never met them before. Infantry, 9 riflemen, 1 automatic rifleman, a medic, a radio operator, and now, 1 flamethrower operator. The sergeant introduces everyone quickly. Names blur together. Miller, Thompson, Garcia, Evans, Reed. You're certain you'll eventually learn them, if everyone survives long enough. One of the younger riflemen notices the tanks beside your feet. He whistles quietly. Hell of a backpack. Several others chuckle. The squad sergeant doesn't. You'll be glad he's carrying it. The laughter disappears immediately. The sergeant continues. When we reach a bunker, he points toward you. He goes forward. The men glance at one another. No one argues. No one volunteers to switch places. One private finally speaks. You'll have cover. You nod. I appreciate that. He smiles awkwardly. I appreciate you. The group laughs softly. Not because the joke is particularly funny. Because everyone needs something to break the tension, even if only for a moment. 2 days later, you board the transport ship. It is larger than any vessel you've ever seen. Steel everywhere. Cranes lifting trucks into cargo holds. Soldiers lining the rails. Rows upon rows of helmets stretching farther than you can count. The ocean smells. Different from home. Saltier. Heavier. Mixed with diesel fuel and engine smoke. Your flamethrower has been carefully secured inside the cargo hold. Without it on your back, you almost feel incomplete. Lighter. Freer. The sensation lasts only until you remember you'll be wearing it again soon enough. The voyage is crowded. Hundreds of men sleep in narrow bunks stacked 3 high. The ship never truly becomes quiet. Engines rumble day and night. Metal groans against the waves. Boots echo endlessly across steel decks. During the day, soldiers write letters. Play cards. Clean rifles that already look spotless. Others simply stand along the railing, staring across the endless Pacific. You often join them. There is something strangely peaceful about the ocean. For hours, nothing changes. Just blue water meeting blue sky. It almost allows you to forget why you're sailing west. Almost. One afternoon, you find yourself standing beside an older corporal. Unlike many aboard ship, he has already seen combat. The faded ribbons on his uniform quietly reveal that much. Without looking away from the horizon, he asks, "First operation?" "Yes." He nods slowly. "I figured." You hesitate. "Were you?" You glance toward his ribbons. "On Saipan." He smiles faintly. "Polilio." The name hangs in the air. You've heard stories. Enough to know not to ask too many questions. After several minutes, the corporal finally speaks again. "When you land." He keeps watching the sea. Everything happens faster than training. You listen carefully. You won't remember every instruction. You won't hear every order. You'll forget half the things they taught you. You begin wondering whether training was enough. The corporal seems to read your thoughts, but you'll remember the important things. He finally turns toward you. Trust your squad. He taps the railing gently, and let them trust you. With that, he quietly walks away, leaving you once again alone with the ocean. Several mornings later, the loudspeaker crackles to life before dawn. Land expected by first light. Immediately, the ship changes. Men begin pulling on equipment. Helmets, webbing, ammunition belts, medical packs. Boots are tightened, letters tucked into pockets. Photographs folded carefully inside uniforms. You collect your own gear in silence. Finally, the armorer hands you the flamethrower. The familiar weight settles onto your shoulders once again, heavier than ever. Or perhaps, you simply understand now where it's about to go. Outside on deck, the horizon slowly brightens. Far ahead, dark shapes begin appearing through the morning mist. Ships, hundreds of them, destroyers, battleships, landing craft, supply vessels. As the sun climbs higher, another shape becomes visible. An island. Low, green, silent. Okinawa. You stare at it for several long moments. It looks almost beautiful from this distance. Rolling hills, dense forests, white clouds drifting lazily overhead. Nothing about it suggests that within days, it will become one of the bloodiest battlefields of the Pacific War. The loudspeaker sounds again. Landing preparations begin in 30 minutes. Around you, thousands of soldiers quietly rise to their feet. Some pray. Some smoke one last cigarette. Others simply stare toward the island. No one speaks very much anymore. There are no speeches left to give. No jokes left to tell. Only the steady rhythm of waves striking steel, and the quiet understanding that by tomorrow, history will no longer be something you read about. You'll be walking through it. Long before the landing craft reaches shore, you hear the battle. At first, it sounds like distant thunder rolling somewhere beyond the horizon. A low, continuous rumble. Steady, relentless. As the minutes pass, the sound grows louder. Battleships fire their enormous guns. One after across the sand. Some still smolder. Others have already filled with seawater. The air smells different now. Salt, diesel fuel, smoke, and something else. Something metallic. The unmistakable smell of war. The coxswain shouts over the engine. 5 minutes. Nobody answers. Everyone checks their equipment one final time. Helmet straps, ammunition, medical pouch, canteen. You instinctively inspect your flamethrower. Harness secure, fuel valves locked, ignition assembly protected, pressure gauge steady. Exactly as you were taught. The sergeant notices. Good habit. He gives your shoulder one reassuring pat. Keep doing that. Simple words. Yet somehow, they calm your nerves more than any speech could. Another explosion erupts somewhere ahead. A towering column of water rises beside one of the landing craft several hundred yards away. For a brief second, the boat disappears behind spray. When the water settles, it continues moving. Someone quietly exhales. No one comments. You all saw the same thing. Luck. Pure luck. The shoreline now fills your entire view. You can make out individual rocks, broken trees, abandoned defensive positions. The beach appears strangely empty. Too empty. The silence unsettles everyone. One rifleman leans toward the sergeant. Thought they said we'd be under fire. The sergeant never looks away from shore. They're waiting. For what? He answers almost immediately. For us to get closer. No one asks another question. The boat strikes a sandbar with a heavy jolt. Everyone instinctively grabs for balance. The engine strains, pushes harder. The hull grinds forward through shallow water. The coxswain raises one hand. Stand by. Your heartbeat becomes impossibly loud. You tighten your grip around the nozzle. Not because you're about to fire. Because your hands need something to hold. The front ramp rattles slightly. Still locked. Still closed. waiting. Then, the signal comes. The heavy steel ramp crashes into the water with a deafening clang. Bright morning sunlight floods into the landing craft. For half a second, nobody moves. Then the first riflemen surge forward. Boots splash into ankle-deep water. Officers shout directions. The world instantly erupts into motion. You step forward. The flamethrower shifts violently against your back as you leave the boat. Your boots sink into wet sand. The weight nearly throws you sideways. You recover before falling. Barely. The training suddenly makes perfect sense. Every careful practice step, every slow turn, every lesson about balance. Without them, you might already be lying face first in the surf. Machine gun fire suddenly cracks somewhere inland. Not the dramatic roar you imagined. Instead, sharp, fast, almost mechanical. Bullets snap overhead. You hear them before fully understanding what they are. The sound resembles someone violently tearing thick cloth. Instinct tells you to duck. The 70-pound tank on your back reminds you that ducking isn't nearly as easy anymore. You crouch behind a low mound of sand. Several members of your squad do the same. The sergeant points inland. Move. There is no panic in his voice. Only urgency. Exactly the tone used during training. One position, then another. Always moving. Never standing still longer than necessary. You begin crossing the beach. The sand is churned into thick mud by hundreds of boots and heavy vehicles. Every step requires effort. The flamethrower pulls relentlessly against your shoulders. Your breathing becomes heavier. Not from fear, from the weight. Halfway across the beach, you glance briefly to your left. Engineers are clearing obstacles. Medics kneel beside wounded men. Radio operators unroll antenna wires through the mud. Tanks crawl slowly ashore, their tracks grinding through sand. Thousands of individual tasks, all happening simultaneously. The battle is far larger than anything you imagined. You are only one tiny part of it. Eventually, your squad reaches the cover of a low ridge overlooking the beach. The sergeant raises a hand. Everyone drops to one knee. For the first time since leaving the landing craft, there is a moment to breathe. You remove your helmet just long enough to wipe sweat from your forehead. It has only been minutes, yet your uniform already feels completely soaked. Charlie appears beside you. His face is streaked with mud. You all right? You nod. I think so. You? He smiles faintly. Ask me tomorrow. You both laugh quietly. Just once. Just enough to remind yourselves that you're still human. The laughter disappears when the radio operator receives a new message. He listens carefully, looks toward the sergeant. There are cave positions farther inland. The sergeant nods. I expected that. He folds the map, looks directly at you. For the first time since landing, your assignment finally arrives. Stay close. We'll need you soon. Those 4 words settle heavily in your chest. Not because they're unexpected, because they've finally become real. Training is over. The long voyage across the Pacific is over. The waiting is over. Somewhere beyond the trees, hidden inside the limestone hills of Okinawa, waits the reason the Army placed a flamethrower on your back. And before this day is over, you'll be asked to use it for the very first time. The march inland begins just after midday. Behind you, the beaches are still alive with movement. More landing craft continue arriving. Fresh troops wade through the surf. Supply trucks grind across temporary roads carved from churned sand. The battle behind you grows larger with every passing hour. But ahead, everything becomes strangely quiet. The jungle swallows sound. Towering trees stretch high overhead, their thick canopies blocking much of the afternoon. Sun. Vines drape from heavy branches like forgotten ropes, while tangled roots twist across the muddy ground beneath your boots. The air hardly moves. Every breath feels warm and damp. Sweat trickles constantly beneath your helmet. It runs into your eyes, down your neck, across your back beneath the heavy steel tanks. Within 20 minutes, your uniform is completely soaked. The farther inland you travel, the more difficult the terrain becomes. Steep limestone ridges rise unexpectedly from the jungle floor. Deep gullies force the squad to climb down one side before scrambling up the other. Loose rocks shift beneath every step. The flamethrower changes everything. A rifleman can duck beneath branches. You cannot. A radio operator can squeeze through narrow gaps. You cannot. Every movement must be deliberate. Every low branch threatens to snag the long nozzle extending from your hands. Every slippery rock reminds you how disastrous a fall could become. More than once, another soldier reaches back to steady you without saying a word. Nobody complains. Everyone understands why. The squad halts near the crest of a wooded hill. The sergeant kneels beside a map spread across an ammunition crate. The radio operator points toward a nearby valley. Recon reports enemy movement around here. The sergeant nods. Probably another defensive line. He folds the map. We move carefully. No one objects. Everyone has begun noticing the same unsettling detail. The jungle feels empty. There are no civilians. Very few birds. Even the insects seem quieter than before. The silence presses against your ears until every snapped twig sounds unnaturally loud. About an hour later, you finally see the first evidence that people once lived here. A small stone farmhouse sits beside a narrow dirt path. Or at least, part of one. The roof has collapsed inward. One wall leans awkwardly against another. Broken farming tools lie scattered. Beneath weeds already beginning to reclaim the ground. An abandoned wooden cart rests on its side nearby. One wheel is missing. The other has almost disappeared beneath climbing vines. You slow your pace for a moment. Someone once called this place home. Children probably played outside these walls. Meals were shared here. Laughter echoed through these rooms. Now, only silence remains. Charlie notices you looking. Hard to imagine, isn't it? That might reveal your position. Instead, each man digs a shallow fighting position. The soil is stubborn. Beneath only a few inches of mud lies solid limestone. Your folding shovel strikes rock again and again. After half an hour, you've barely created enough space to lie down. The flamethrower rests beside your foxhole. For the first time all day, its weight leaves your shoulders. The relief is immediate, almost intoxicating. You slowly roll your shoulders. Every muscle protests. You hadn't realized how exhausted you were until now. Dinner arrives in the least impressive form imaginable. A ration tin, hard biscuits, powdered coffee. No one complains. Food is food. You sit beside Charlie as darkness settles across the hills. The jungle changes after sunset. During daylight, everything feels merely hot and uncomfortable. At night, it becomes mysterious. Every distant rustle seems important. Every snapping branch draws attention. Somewhere far away, an owl calls. Another answers. Charlie quietly stirs his coffee with the handle of a spoon. You know what I miss. You smile faintly. Real coffee. He laughs. No. He looks toward the dark tree line. I miss hearing cars. You blink. Cars. Back home. He shrugs. I never noticed traffic before. He smiles to himself. Now I'd give anything just to hear someone arguing over a parking space. You chuckle quietly. I miss lawn mowers. Charlie laughs harder this time. Lawn mowers. I used to complain every Saturday morning. You shake your head. Now, I think I'd actually enjoy hearing one. For several moments, the two of you sit smiling in the darkness, thinking about ordinary things, things that suddenly seem impossibly far away. The laughter fades when the sentry quietly whistles twice. The agreed signal. Everyone freezes. The sergeant crawls toward the forward observation point. Several long seconds pass. No one moves. Finally, he returns. Probably wildlife. Relief spreads silently through the line. Even so, nobody truly relaxes again. Much later, after most of the squad has fallen asleep, you remain awake. The jungle is never completely silent. Tiny insects chirp somewhere beyond the trees. Water drips steadily from leaves after the afternoon rain. Occasionally, a distant artillery shell echoes across the hills like muffled thunder. Beside you, the flamethrower lies quietly beneath a waterproof cover. Moonlight catches the steel tanks just enough to outline their shape. You stare at them. Only days ago, they were simply strange pieces of equipment inside a wooden crate. Now, they feel almost familiar. Not comforting, never comforting, but familiar. You reach over and gently run your hand across one of the steel cylinders. It feels cool beneath your fingertips. Solid, reliable, dangerous. The instructor's words return unexpectedly. Asterisk, the weapon isn't your greatest burden. Asterisk, the greatest burden. Asterisk, is deciding when to use it. Asterisk, you close your eyes. Somewhere out there, hidden among these hills, wait the caves you were trained to clear. You haven't seen them yet. You haven't used the flamethrower in combat. But deep down, you know tomorrow may finally be the day. The jungle seems to know it too, because sometime after midnight, as mist quietly drifts through the trees, even the insects fall silent. Morning arrives without a sunrise. The thick blanket of cloud that settled over Okinawa during the night refuses to move, leaving the jungle beneath a dull gray sky. Everything is wet. Your boots are wet. Your gloves are wet. Even the leather sling hanging across your shoulder feels damp enough to wring out like a towel. You begin to wonder if anything on this island will ever truly dry again. Breakfast is quiet. A few hard biscuits. Cold coffee. Nobody complains. The routine itself has become comforting. Simple. Predictable. The war may change every hour, but breakfast always seems to taste exactly the same. The squad is moving before 6 o'clock. Mist hangs low across the jungle floor, curling lazily around tree trunks and limestone boulders. Visibility is poor. Sometimes you can see 50 yards ahead. Sometimes only 20. The sergeant seems content with the weather. If we can't see them, he says quietly, they probably can't see us either. Charlie whispers beside you, I'd rather see them. You silently agree. The climb becomes steeper. Every few hundred yards, another limestone ridge blocks your path. The rock is sharp enough to slice through boot leather if you're careless. Roots twist across the ground like sleeping snakes. Twice you nearly lose your footing. Each time, another member of the squad reaches out without hesitation, steadying the heavy tanks on your back before they can throw you off balance. No one says anything afterward. They simply keep walking. Somehow, you've already become part of the team. Around mid-morning, the point man suddenly freezes. His raised fist brings the entire column to an immediate halt. No voices, no movement, only breathing. The sergeant quietly crawls forward. You kneel where you are. The flamethrower presses heavily against your shoulders. Even kneeling requires effort. After nearly a minute, the sergeant motions everyone forward one at a time. Slowly, carefully. When your turn comes, you finally see what stopped the patrol. Hidden beneath tangled vines, barely visible unless you were standing almost directly in front of it, is a cave. Not a dramatic cavern. Not some enormous opening stretching into the mountainside. Just a narrow black hole. Perhaps 4 feet high, 6 feet wide. Almost ordinary. Until you realize someone deliberately tried to hide it. Freshly cut branches rest across the entrance. Loose dirt has been spread around the opening. From only 30 yards away, you probably would have walked straight past it. The sergeant studies it through binoculars. No movement. The radio operator kneels beside him. Recon marked a position somewhere around here. The sergeant nods. I think they found it. For several minutes, nothing happens. Nobody rushes toward the entrance. Nobody fires. The squad quietly spreads out, taking positions behind rocks and trees overlooking the cave. Rifles point toward the darkness. The machine gun team settles behind a fallen log. The medic moves farther back. Exactly as practiced. Exactly as planned. Only one soldier remains standing. You. The sergeant walks over. His expression is calm, almost reassuring. He speaks softly enough that only you can hear. This is why they brought you. You nod. Your throat suddenly feels dry despite the humidity. The procedure is exactly the same as training. At least, that's what you tell yourself. Inspect the valves. Check the pressure. Confirm the ignition cap. Test the pilot assembly. Every movement feels strangely automatic. Months of practice quietly take over. Your hands remember what your mind is trying desperately not to think about. The sergeant watches silently. Finally, you ready? You take one slow breath. As ready as I'll ever be. He places one hand gently on your shoulder. We're right behind you. Those words matter more than he probably realizes. The squad begins laying down covering fire towards several nearby ridges. Not because they've seen anyone, because if someone is inside the cave, they don't want him choosing this exact moment to emerge. The sound of rifles echoes through the jungle. Sharp, controlled, measured. The machine gun fires several short bursts. Leaves rain gently from nearby branches. Birds explode from the treetops, disappearing into the gray sky. The jungle suddenly feels alive again. Only, not in a comforting way. The sergeant gives you a single nod. Go. Your boots carry you forward before your mind fully catches up. Each step feels strangely slow. The flamethrower shifts against your back. Its familiar weight somehow feels heavier than ever. 20 yards. The cave entrance grows larger. 15. The opening remains perfectly dark. 10. You can now see damp limestone inside. Nothing moves. 5. You stop. Exactly where training taught you. Never closer than necessary. Never farther than effective range. You slowly lower yourself onto one knee. The nozzle comes up. Steady. Deliberate. Just as you practiced dozens of times. Your left thumb reaches for the ignition lever. Click. A tiny blue pilot flame appears. Almost delicate. Almost peaceful. You take one final breath. The world seems to become strangely quiet. The rifle fire behind you fades into the distance. You hear only your own breathing. Your heartbeat. The faint hiss of pressurized fuel waiting inside steel tanks strapped across your back. The instructor's voice echoes somewhere deep inside your memory. Asterisk short bursts. Asterisk. Asterisk never rush. Asterisk. Asterisk stay calm. Asterisk. You squeeze the trigger. A brilliant stream of orange flame surges forward with a deep rushing sound, disappearing into the darkness beyond the cave entrance. Heat rolls back toward your face immediately. Even from this distance, it feels like opening the door of an enormous furnace. 1001. 1002. You release the trigger exactly as trained. The stream disappears. The cave remains silent. Only gray smoke slowly curls from the entrance before drifting upward into the trees. You continue aiming, waiting. The longest 10 seconds of your life pass without movement. Nothing emerges. No gunfire. No voices. No sudden charge from the darkness. Only smoke. The sergeant quietly steps beside you. Hold. You remain perfectly still. Another 20 seconds. Still nothing. Finally, he raises one hand toward the rifle squad. 2 soldiers cautiously move forward while keeping their weapons trained on the opening. They disappear briefly inside. You lower the nozzle slightly. Your hands suddenly feel very tired. After nearly a minute, one rifleman steps back into daylight. He shakes his head once. Clear. The sergeant nods. Move out. That's it. No celebration. No dramatic speeches. The patrol simply reforms and continues deeper into the jungle, as though another task has been completed, another checkpoint passed, another page quietly turned. You fall into position near the rear of the column. Charlie eventually walks beside you. Neither of you speaks for several minutes. Finally, you all right? You think carefully before answering. I don't know. Charlie nods. I don't think anyone would. The two of you continue walking through the mist. Behind you, the hidden cave slowly disappears beneath trees and drifting smoke. Ahead, the jungle stretches endlessly across Okinawa's rugged hills. And somewhere beyond the next ridge, another hidden entrance waits patiently beneath vines and stone. Another assignment. Another quiet walk forward. Another moment when history will ask one ordinary soldier to carry fire. By the end of the first week, the routine begins to settle over you. Not because it has become easy. Nothing about Okinawa is easy. But the human mind has an extraordinary ability to accept almost anything if it happens often enough. Every morning begins the same. Wake before dawn. Brush the mud from your boots. Check your rifle. Inspect the flamethrower. Inspect it again. The instructor's voice still echoes inside your mind every time your hands move across the steel tanks. Asterisk, check every valve. Asterisk, asterisk, trust your own inspection. Asterisk, asterisk, never assume yesterday's equipment will survive today. Asterisk, you obey those lessons without thinking. Run your fingers over every hose. Check every clamp. Look for tiny cracks in the rubber. Feel for loose fittings. Wipe away dirt from the pressure gauge. Only then do you lift the 70-pound burden onto your shoulders. The familiar weight settles against your back. Somehow it no longer surprises you. That realization worries you more than the weight itself. The jungle has become your world. You no longer notice the constant humidity. Or perhaps, your body has simply surrendered. Your uniform is permanently damp. Your boots squish softly with every step. Your hands smell faintly of fuel no matter how often you wash them. Sometimes you catch yourself raising your sleeve to your face. The scent is still there. Gasoline, burned oil, hot steel. The smell follows you everywhere. Even your blanket has begun to carry it. Charlie jokes one evening, "If we ever go home." He wrinkles his nose. "Our mothers won't let us inside." You smile. "They'll probably smell us coming from the end of the street." Several nearby riflemen quietly laugh. For a brief moment, everyone sounds almost normal. The squad gradually learns your pace. No one rushes you anymore. When climbing steep hills, someone automatically walks behind you. When crossing streams, another soldier quietly steadies the nozzle. When crawling beneath fallen trees, someone always helps lift the tanks over the obstacle. No one gives orders. No one discusses it. The routine simply develops naturally. The flamethrower isn't only your responsibility anymore. Keeping you alive has quietly become everyone else's responsibility too. One afternoon, while climbing a rocky ridge, you slip on wet limestone. Your left boot slides unexpectedly. The heavy tanks immediately pull you backward. Before you can react, two strong hands grab the shoulder harness. Charlie, another rifleman, grabs the nozzle. Together they steady you before you hit the ground. Nobody says anything. Charlie simply pats one of the steel cylinders. "Told you. We're not letting you fall." You nod quietly. "Thank you." He grins. "Don't thank me. I don't want to explain to the sergeant how I dropped the Army's most expensive backpack." The squad laughs. Even you. Days pass. Then more days. The jungle begins to blur together. Every valley resembles the last. Every limestone ridge seems familiar. Every cave appears to emerge from the earth exactly the same way. Dark, cold, silent. Some are empty. Others aren't. Each time, the routine repeats. The riflemen establish security. The machine gun covers the approach. The medic waits farther behind. The sergeant nods toward you. You move forward. Inspect. Ignite. Aim. 2-second burst. Wait. Move on. At first, you counted every second aloud beneath your breath. Now, your finger seems to know when 2 seconds have passed. The movement has become instinct. That thought unsettles you. One evening, as the squad settles into another temporary camp, the medic quietly sits beside you. Unlike most conversations, this one begins without jokes. "You sleeping all right?" You shrug. "I sleep." He notices the careful choice of words. "That's not what I asked." You stare toward the jungle. "I close my eyes. I wake up. I suppose that's enough." The medic nods thoughtfully. "You dream?" You hesitate. "Sometimes." "What about?" You think for a long moment. "Not the battles." The medic seems surprised. "Then what?" You smile faintly. "My father's workshop." He waits. I keep dreaming about helping him repair bicycles. You quietly chuckle. I don't even know why. The medic smiles. I do. You look toward him. Because your mind remembers peaceful places. He stands. Hold on to those. Before walking away, he adds one final sentence. War has a habit of trying to replace them. The following afternoon, rain returns. Not ordinary rain. A tropical downpour so heavy that visibility shrinks to only a few yards. The jungle transforms into flowing water. Small streams become rushing rivers. Mud slides from the hillsides. Every path disappears beneath brown water. The squad shelters beneath a rocky overhang. You remove the flamethrower for the first time all day. Your shoulders sigh with relief. Charlie rubs his knees. You think this rain will stop? The sergeant glances toward the gray sky. Eventually, when he shrugs. October. A few men laugh. The sound echoes softly beneath the stone. It is amazing how valuable laughter becomes when there is almost nothing else to enjoy. That night, you volunteer for sentry duty. Not because you particularly enjoy standing watch. Because sleeping has become strangely difficult. The jungle after rain feels different. Mist hangs low across the ground. Moonlight filters weakly through drifting clouds. Everything seems softer, quieter. The flamethrower rests beside you against a tree. You study its silhouette in the darkness. Weeks ago, you hated the sight of it. Now, you simply accept it. It has become another piece of equipment. Like your helmet, like your boots, like your canteen. That realization frightens you. Not because the weapon has changed, because you have. The older corporal aboard the transport ship had once told you something. Asterisk, everything happens faster than training. Asterisk, he had been right. What he hadn't mentioned was how quickly extraordinary things become ordinary. Carrying 70 pounds of fuel through enemy territory. Sleeping beside steel tanks every night. Walking toward hidden caves while everyone else stepped aside. At some point, none of it had seemed unusual anymore. That frightened you more than the enemy ever could. Because if war could make this feel normal, what else might it quietly change? A cool breeze finally stirs the trees for the first time in days. The leaves rustle softly overhead. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl calls once. Then again, you close your eyes for only a second. When you open them, the flamethrower is still there, waiting patiently beside the tree. Tomorrow morning, you'll lift it onto your shoulders once again. And somewhere beyond the next ridge, another hidden bunker, another silent cave, another assignment, is already waiting for you. By the second week, the weight on your shoulders has stopped changing. 70 pounds is still 70 pounds. The steel tanks still dig into the same bruises. The shoulder straps still leave deep red marks across your uniform every evening. Your knees still ache after climbing limestone ridges. Your lower back still protests every time you remove the harness. That weight, you can understand. It's measurable, visible. Everyone around you can see it. What no one can see is the other weight, the one that slowly settles somewhere behind your eyes. The squad has developed its own rhythm now. Nobody needs to be told where to stand anymore. The machine gun team automatically searches for high ground. The medic quietly chooses cover before anyone else notices it. Charlie instinctively walks a few steps behind you whenever the trail becomes narrow. The sergeant no longer needs to issue many commands. Months of training, combined with weeks of combat, have quietly transformed 12 strangers into something closer to a family. Not because you always agree, because everyone has learned to trust the man beside them. Out here, trust weighs less than steel, but it's worth far more. That afternoon, the radio crackles unexpectedly. A reconnaissance patrol has discovered another fortified position. This one is larger than the previous caves. Several entrances, connected underground, hidden beneath a limestone ridge overlooking a valley. The sergeant studies the hand-drawn map. They've had months to prepare this one. Nobody says anything. There isn't much to say. The patrol begins moving. Slowly, methodically. Every few hundred yards, someone stops to listen. Not because they hear anything, because not hearing anything has become suspicious. The jungle should never be this quiet. The climb toward the ridge is exhausting. Loose rocks slide beneath your boots. The tanks sway slightly with every careful step. More than once, you stop simply to catch your breath. Charlie notices. Need a minute? You nod. He doesn't rush you. Nobody does. The squad simply waits. Patiently, as though those extra 30 seconds might one day save everyone's lives. Perhaps they will. When you finally reach the top, the valley stretches out beneath you. From here, it almost looks peaceful. Dense green jungle, tall grass moving gently in the breeze. A narrow stream winding through scattered trees. If someone had shown you this view before the war, you might have imagined farmers working nearby, children chasing one another across the hills, birds filling the air with song. Instead, you notice something else. The grass has been cut in strange straight lines. Bushes grow in oddly perfect patterns. Several rocks seem too carefully placed. The sergeant lowers his binoculars. They're hiding something. Engineers move forward first. Carefully, patiently. Using long steel probes, they inspect the ground ahead one careful step at a time. You watch with fascination. Every few yards, the probe disappears into soft earth, then continues onward. Suddenly, one engineer freezes. He brushes away several handfuls of leaves. Beneath them lies a wooden hatch almost perfectly hidden beneath dirt and moss. Not a cave, a tunnel entrance, barely large enough for one man. The engineer whistles softly. Found another one. The sergeant quietly shakes his head. They've turned the whole hill into a fortress. The squad spreads into defensive positions. The machine gun covers one approach. Riflemen watch the surrounding jungle. The radio operator quietly requests artillery support. Minutes later, a handful of shells crash somewhere behind the ridge. The explosions echo across the valley. Dust rises. Small stones tumble down the hillside. Then, silence returns. The sergeant looks toward you. They'll still be inside. You already know. Artillery rarely reaches deep underground. That is why you're here. This time, the walk feels different. Not because you're more frightened, because you're less frightened. And somehow, that concerns you. You approach the tunnel entrance exactly as before. Check the pressure. Check the ignition. Check the nozzle. Everything perfect. Everything familiar. The tiny blue pilot flame appears with its familiar click. Weeks ago, your hands trembled every time you saw it. Now, they remain perfectly steady. You stare at the small blue flame. It hasn't changed. Only you have. The sergeant quietly raises his hand. You nod. Take one careful breath. Aim. A short burst of flame disappears into the darkness beneath the hill. Heat washes back across your face. The familiar roar fills the narrow entrance before fading almost as quickly as it began. You release the trigger. Exactly 2 seconds. Exactly as trained. Smoke slowly rolls from the tunnel. Gray at first, then darker. The squad waits. Nobody moves. The only sound is the faint crackling echo drifting from somewhere deep underground. 1 minute passes. Then another. Nothing emerges. Finally, the sergeant gives a slow nod. Move. The patrol continues. No celebration. No discussion. Another assignment completed. Another hill crossed off the map. That evening, you clean the soot from the nozzle as you've done dozens of times before. The black residue stubbornly clings to the steel. You scrape gently with a cloth. Then again. Eventually, Charlie sits beside you. You. No. He watches you work. I used to think cleaning my rifle was boring. You smile. I miss boring. Charlie laughs quietly. So do I. For several moments. Neither of you speaks. The jungle around camp slowly settles into darkness. Someone nearby quietly hums a tune from home. Another soldier writes another letter. The medic replaces a bandage beneath the fading light. Ordinary moments. Tiny moments. The kind that somehow feel more valuable than anything else. Charlie eventually breaks the silence. What are you going to do after the war? The question catches you off guard. You honestly haven't thought about it. For weeks. Tomorrow has been as far ahead as you've allowed yourself to imagine. You stare into the trees. I don't know. I think. You pause. I'd like to build something. Charlie smiles. What? You shrug. A house. A workshop. A fence. I don't really care. He looks puzzled. You just want to build? You nod. After spending so much time watching things destroyed, I think I'd rather spend the rest of my life putting things back together. Charlie doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he quietly extends his hand. The two of you shake. No speeches. No promises. Just two tired soldiers sitting beneath unfamiliar stars, quietly imagining a future neither one can yet see. Above you, the clouds finally begin to clear. For the first time since arriving on Okinawa, a few stars appear between the drifting branches. You find yourself staring upward, not because you're searching for anything, simply because, for the first time in many days, the sky reminds you that somewhere beyond this island, beyond the smoke, beyond the endless jungle, there is still a peaceful world waiting. You only hope. It will still recognize you when you finally return home. Hashtag Chapter 10, The Longest Night. The weather changes again. It always seems to. By late afternoon, dark clouds gather over the hills, swallowing what little sunlight had managed to break through the jungle canopy. A cool wind moves across the ridges, carrying with it the distant smell of rain and churned earth. The sergeant studies the sky for only a moment. We're staying here tonight. Nobody argues. No one particularly enjoys marching through Okinawa after sunset. The jungle belongs to the darkness once daylight disappears. The squad chooses a position along the edge of another limestone ridge. It isn't comfortable. Very little on Okinawa ever is. But it offers something more valuable than comfort. A clear view of the valley below. The men begin preparing another temporary position. Shallow foxholes. Ammunition checked. Radios tested. Medical supplies reorganized. The familiar routine has become strangely reassuring. When people know exactly what to do, they have less time to think. You remove the flamethrower from your shoulders with a slow sigh. Even after weeks of carrying it, every evening feels like someone has quietly lifted a heavy stone from your back. You gently lean it against a tree, almost carefully, not because you're afraid of damaging it, because it has become oddly familiar, almost like a trusted tool. That realization still unsettles you. Rain begins shortly after sunset, not the violent tropical downpour you've already experienced. This rain is quieter, steady, patient. Tiny droplets tap softly against leaves overhead like thousands of tiny fingers drumming on green glass. The sound would almost be relaxing, if not for where you are. Charlie quietly unwraps a chocolate bar he'd been saving for several days. He breaks it exactly in half. Without saying a word, he hands one piece to you. You smile. I thought you were saving this. I was. What changed? He shrugs. If tomorrow's bad. He looks out into the darkness. I'd rather eat chocolate today. You can't argue with that. The chocolate has melted slightly in the tropical heat. It sticks to your fingers. For a brief moment, you aren't thinking about caves, or flamethrowers, or the war. You're simply two young men sharing the last piece of chocolate either of you has seen in weeks. Funny how something so small suddenly feels so valuable. As darkness deepens, the conversations grow quieter. The medic quietly tells a story about getting lost while fishing with his father when he was 12. One of the riflemen admits he'd never actually left his home state before joining the army. Another insists that when the war ends, he's going to sleep for an entire week. Charlie laughs. I'll beat you. I'm sleeping for 2. The sergeant, polishing mud from his binoculars, finally joins the conversation. You boys won't know what to do after 3 days. Several heads turn. You'll wake up before sunrise. Look around for your helmet. Wonder where your rifle is. A few men chuckle. The sergeant smiles faintly. It takes time. Nobody asks what he means. They already understand. Later, Long after most of the squad has fallen asleep, you take the first watch. The jungle has changed again. Rain has stopped. Mist hangs low between the trees, drifting silently across the valley below. The moon appears only occasionally through gaps in the clouds, enough to paint everything in soft shades of silver and gray. The flamethrower rests beside your foxhole. Its steel tanks reflect faint streaks of moonlight. You find yourself staring at it. It seems strangely peaceful sitting there. Quiet. Motionless. Nothing about it suggests what it is capable of. You suppose many dangerous things look harmless when left alone. An hour passes. Perhaps two. Time becomes difficult to measure. The jungle has its own clock. Leaves rustle. Water drips. Branches sway gently in the night breeze. Then, something changes. At first, you aren't even sure you've heard it. A faint sound, almost too quiet to notice. Crunch. You slowly lift your head. Silence. Perhaps it was an animal. You continue watching. Another minute passes. Then, crunch. This time, closer. Your grip tightens around your rifle. You don't immediately wake the others. Training has taught you something important. Listen first. React second. The sound comes again. Several footsteps. Slow. Careful. Moving somewhere beyond the trees. You quietly slide toward Charlie's position. Without speaking, you gently tap the heel of his boot. His eyes open instantly. No panic. Just awareness. You point toward the darkness. He listens. For several long seconds. Nothing. Then, both of you hear it. Another faint movement. Charlie quietly crawls toward the sergeant. Within moments, the entire squad is awake. Nobody speaks above a whisper. The machine gun crew quietly adjusts their position. The medic stays low. The radio operator removes the safety cover from his transmitter. The sergeant studies the darkness through binoculars despite knowing they're nearly useless at night. Finally, the sound stops. Completely. The jungle becomes still once more. 5 minutes pass. Then 10. Nothing. The sergeant lowers the binoculars. Probably a patrol. Charlie whispers. Hours. The sergeant shakes his head slowly. I don't know. Nobody likes that answer. Eventually, the tension begins to fade. The squad settles back into position. No shots are fired. No orders shouted. No dramatic attack ever comes. But sleep doesn't return easily after that. Just before dawn, the eastern sky slowly brightens. Gray becomes blue. Blue becomes pale orange. Morning birds cautiously begin singing once more. You stretch your stiff shoulders. Another night survived. The sergeant quietly pours himself another cup of coffee from a battered metal pot. He notices you rubbing your back. Heavier every day? You smile tiredly. I thought I'd get used to it. You do. He takes another sip. The strange part. He looks toward the flamethrower resting against the tree. Is that one day? You'll put it down, and your shoulders will still feel like you're carrying it. You glance toward the steel tanks. At the time, you assume he's talking about sore muscles. Years later, you'll understand he meant something entirely different. The sun finally rises above the jungle. Its warm light slowly chases the mist from the valley. Another day begins. Another patrol. Another march through unfamiliar hills. Another chance to make it home. You lift the flamethrower onto your shoulders once again. The familiar weight settles into place. Your knees bend slightly. Your back leans forward. You tighten the shoulder straps. Take one slow breath. Then quietly fall back into line. Somewhere beyond the next ridge. History is waiting again. By now, you have stopped counting the days. Not because they no longer matter. Because each one feels almost identical to the last. Wake before dawn. March through the jungle. Climb another ridge. Cross another stream. Check the flamethrower. Check it again. Somewhere along the trail, someone makes a joke. Someone else laughs. Then everyone falls quiet as another hillside comes into view. The routine repeats so often that time itself begins to blur. You measure life differently now. Not by dates, but by hills crossed, caves cleared, nights survived. The morning air is unusually cool. A gentle breeze slips through the jungle for the first time in what feels like weeks. The movement of fresh air almost catches you by surprise. Leaves sway overhead. The smell of damp earth mixes with salt carried faintly from the distant ocean. For just a moment, the island feels peaceful. Charlie notices the breeze too. Feels almost like home. You smile. If home had mosquitoes the size of sparrows. He laughs. Quietly. I forgot about those. The squad continues forward. Small conversations like these have become precious. Little reminders that beneath the helmets and uniforms, everyone is still simply a young man trying to make it through another day. Around mid-morning, the point man suddenly raises his fist. The entire patrol freezes. The silence arrives instantly. No one asks questions. No one needs to. The sergeant slowly crawls forward through thick grass. You remain where you are, listening, watching, waiting. Several long minutes pass. Finally, the sergeant waves the squad forward. Slowly, very slowly. When you reach his position, you immediately understand why. Spread across the hillside below, hidden beneath carefully arranged brush, is something far larger than any position you've encountered before. At first, it looks like nothing more than scattered rocks. But the longer you study the hillside, the more impossible it becomes to ignore. Tiny openings, almost invisible, one beside a fallen tree, another hidden behind thick vines, a third tucked beneath an overhanging ledge, then a fourth, a fifth. The hillside isn't simply hiding one bunker. The entire hillside is the bunker. The sergeant quietly lowers his binoculars. They've hollowed out the mountain. No one replies. There is nothing to add. The radio operator quietly contacts headquarters. Support is requested. Everyone settles into concealed positions while waiting. Nearly 20 minutes later, the first artillery shells begin arriving. The sound echoes across the valley like rolling thunder. The hillside disappears beneath fountains of dirt and broken stone. Branches snap. Dust fills the air. The bombardment continues for several minutes. When it finally stops, the jungle becomes strangely silent once again. Smoke drifts lazily upward. The sergeant watches through binoculars, then quietly sighs. They're still there. You almost expected that answer. The caves run too deep. Artillery can scar the hillside, but not always reach what lies beneath it. The squad receives new orders. Rather than approach the largest entrance, you'll clear the smaller observation tunnels first. One by one, the riflemen move carefully along the ridge, watching every shadow, every rock, every patch of tall grass. You notice how naturally everyone works together now. The machine gun crew no longer waits for instructions before choosing their firing position. The medic quietly prepares bandages before anyone asks. Charlie automatically walks behind your left shoulder. Ready. Always ready. Weeks ago, you were strangers. Now, the squad moves almost like one person. The first tunnel entrance appears beneath a twisted fig tree, barely visible. Only a thin black slit disappearing into solid limestone. The sergeant nods toward you. You already know what comes next. Without speaking, you kneel. The familiar routine begins. Pressure gauge, ignition cap, pilot assembly, harness, everything exactly where it should be. You almost perform the inspection without looking. Habit has taken over. The tiny blue pilot flame appears. Its quiet hiss somehow feels comforting now. Not because you enjoy it, because familiar things feel safer than unfamiliar ones. Even here, you steady the nozzle. Take one slow breath, then another. The jungle around you seems to disappear. Only the tunnel remains. A narrow opening in the rock, dark enough that sunlight never reaches more than a few feet inside. You squeeze the trigger. A brilliant stream of fire disappears into the darkness. Heat rolls outward immediately. The limestone itself seems to glow for just a moment. 1001. 1002. Release. Silence. Smoke slowly drifts upward. Exactly as before. Exactly as trained. The sergeant waits nearly half a minute before signaling two riflemen. Forward. They cautiously inspect the entrance. Moments later, one raises his thumb. Clear. The patrol moves on. No cheering. No celebration. Only another small mark on a map that grows more crowded each day. By late afternoon, the hillside has surrendered several more hidden tunnels, each one carefully concealed, each one requiring patience, discipline, teamwork. The physical work has become exhausting. Your shoulders burn constantly. Your gloves are stiff with dried mud and soot. Your boots feel twice their normal weight. Even lifting your canteen requires effort. Charlie notices you stretching your back. Hurting. You nod. My shoulders feel like someone replaced them with bricks. He grins. My feet have declared independence. You laugh quietly. Think they'll surrender? Not before the Japanese do. The two of you share another tired smile. Sometimes, that's enough. As evening approaches, the squad finally receives orders to withdraw. Not because the hill is completely secure, because darkness is arriving. The jungle changes after sunset. Everyone knows it. The march back feels longer than usual. Fatigue settles over the patrol like another layer of equipment. Nobody talks much anymore. There simply isn't enough energy left. When camp finally comes into view, several men quietly exhale with relief. The day's work is over, at least for now. That night, you remove the flamethrower more slowly than usual. Your shoulders ache long after the harness leaves your body. You sit on an overturned ammunition crate. The medic notices you rubbing your hands. He walks over carrying a small tin. Here. You open it. Hand cream. The gesture surprises you. My wife mailed it. He smiles. Said I'd probably ignore it. You rub a little into your cracked palms. It smells faintly of lavender. For a brief moment, the scent carries you somewhere else entirely. A quiet home. Clean sheets. Fresh. Laundry drying in the sun. Open windows. Peace. The moment passes quickly, but not before reminding you that somewhere beyond Okinawa, normal life still exists. You simply have to survive long enough to find it again. Above the trees, the stars shine unusually bright tonight. You look at them for several moments before climbing into your foxhole. Tomorrow, the hills will still be there. The caves will still be hidden. The flamethrower will still be waiting beside your pack. But tonight, for a few precious hours, you allow yourself to simply be another tired soldier, looking up at the same stars that shine over home. For the first time since arriving on Okinawa, the orders are different. Not advance, not attack, not clear another ridge. Instead, the sergeant gathers everyone shortly after sunrise and quietly announces, "We're staying put today." At first, no one reacts. The words seem almost unfamiliar. Staying put. The phrase doesn't belong in a combat zone. Charlie blinks. We're not marching. The sergeant shakes his head. Divisions reorganizing. Fresh supplies. New units moving into position. We wait. For several long seconds. Nobody says anything. Then, almost together, the entire squad exhales. The morning feels strangely quiet. Without the constant pressure to move, time slows to a pace you've almost forgotten. The medic reorganizes his supplies. The radio operator replaces worn batteries. Several riflemen finally clean mud from equipment that hasn't been properly cleaned in days. You decide to do the same. The flamethrower rests across your lap. Sunlight reflects softly from the steel tanks. You remove the pressure regulator. Carefully clean the threads. Inspect every hose. Polish soot from the nozzle. The work is oddly calming. Machines make sense. Every part has a purpose. Every problem usually has a solution. People are far more complicated. Charlie eventually wanders over carrying 2 cups of coffee. Calling it coffee is generous. It tastes somewhere between burnt beans and muddy water. Still, it's warm. He hands 1 cup to you. You know? He sits beside you. I've been thinking. That's dangerous. He laughs. Probably. He stares toward the jungle. When this is over, I'm buying the biggest breakfast anyone's ever seen. You smile. What'll you order? He doesn't hesitate. eggs, bacon, toast, pancakes, 3 cups of real coffee. He pauses. And pie. For breakfast. He nods confidently. If I survive this place, I've earned pie for breakfast. You laugh. So have I. Nearby, several soldiers have started an argument. Not about strategy, not about politics, about baseball. Which team would win the championship if the season weren't interrupted by war? The discussion grows surprisingly passionate. Statistics are quoted, players defended, managers criticized. For 10 wonderful minutes, the war quietly disappears. They're simply young men arguing about sports, exactly as they might have done back home. The sergeant watches with a faint smile. He doesn't interrupt. Perhaps he understands how valuable ordinary conversations have become. Around midday, a supply convoy finally arrives. Fresh ammunition, medical equipment, clean uniforms. Most importantly, mail. The word spreads through camp faster than anything else. Mail's here. Soldiers seem to appear from every direction. Names are called one after another. Some receive several letters. Others receive none. Eventually, the clerk looks down at another envelope. Private, he calls your name. Your heart lifts unexpectedly. The envelope is slightly worn from traveling across the Pacific. The handwriting is immediately familiar. Your mother. You carefully sit beneath a nearby tree before opening it. Inside, several neatly folded pages. She writes, about ordinary things. The neighbor finally painted his fence. Your father forgot. He pulls out a deck of playing cards. Slightly damp. Corners bent. Still usable. You play. You nod. The two of you begin a quiet game. Before long, 2 more riflemen wander over. Then another. Soon, half the squad is sitting together. Nobody cares who wins. The cards are simply an excuse to sit close. Talk. Laugh. Forget. For one precious hour. The jungle becomes nothing more than background noise. Later that night, after everyone has settled into their foxholes, you take one final look at your mother's letter. You carefully fold it. Place it inside the breast pocket of your uniform, directly above your heart. Some soldiers carry lucky coins. Others carry photographs. You carry words. Words about bicycles, gardens, Sunday mornings, fresh bread, ordinary life. You suspect they're stronger than luck. Because tomorrow, when the heavy flamethrower settles onto your shoulders once again, it won't just be steel you're carrying. You'll also be carrying a small reminder of exactly why you're fighting so hard to make it home. The rain returns before dawn. Not with thunder, not with lightning. Just a quiet, relentless curtain of water that seems determined to soak every inch of Okinawa once again. By now, no one bothers complaining. Rain has become another member of the platoon. Always present, always unwelcome. You quietly pull your helmet lower and begin checking your equipment beneath a poncho stretched between 2 trees. The flamethrower glistens with tiny beads of water. You carefully wipe each valve dry. Then the ignition assembly. Then the pressure gauge. Moisture isn't merely uncomfortable. It's another problem to solve. Another detail that can never be ignored. The sergeant walks past. Good. He nods toward the weapon. Take care of it. And it'll usually take care of you. You aren't entirely convinced, but you appreciate the encouragement. The column steps off just after sunrise, or what passes for sunrise beneath thick storm clouds. The trail has disappeared beneath mud. Every boot sinks several inches with each step. The heavy flamethrower pulls against your shoulders as though someone behind you is trying to drag you backward. Charlie notices you struggling through one particularly deep stretch. You all right? You grin tiredly. I think the mud wants the Army's flamethrower more than the Japanese do. Charlie laughs. If it steals it, I'm not helping you explain that to the sergeant. The joke earns a quiet chuckle from the men nearby. Small laughter. Brief, but enough to lighten another miserable march. Hours pass. The rain never stops. Everything slows. Progress is measured in yards instead of miles. The engineers spend more time clearing fallen trees than searching for hidden tunnels. Vehicles have long since disappeared behind. The jungle belongs only to men on foot now. At one point, the trail narrows beside a steep drop. The slope falls away into thick jungle almost 50 feet below. The sergeant motions everyone across one at a time. You wait until nearly everyone is crossed. The flamethrower makes balancing difficult. Very difficult. You take one careful step, then another. Your right boot suddenly slips. The mud gives way beneath you. For one terrifying heartbeat, the heavy tanks begin pulling you sideways toward the edge. Then, a hand grabs your webbing. Another catches the shoulder harness. Charlie and Miller, together they pull you back onto solid ground. Nobody says a word for several seconds. Everyone simply catches their breath. Finally, Charlie grins. You owe me another piece of chocolate. You laugh. If we ever find any. The sergeant pats your shoulder. That's why nobody walks alone. The rain finally begins easing late that afternoon. A faint shaft of sunlight breaks through the clouds, illuminating the jungle in soft golden light. Steam immediately begins rising from the soaked earth. The entire forest seems to breathe. Mist curls around tree trunks. Water drips steadily from every leaf. For a few quiet moments, the island almost looks beautiful again. You stop beside a small stream to refill your canteen. The water runs crystal clear over smooth limestone. Tiny fish dart between rocks. A bright blue kingfisher suddenly lands on a nearby branch. It sits there for only a few seconds before diving gracefully into the water. Charlie watches it disappear. Funny. What? The birds don't seem to care there's a war. You think about that. They probably don't know. He nods. Maybe that's for the best. The patrol reaches a small abandoned village shortly before dusk. Only 4 houses remain standing. The others have collapsed beneath shellfire and neglect. One wooden windmill still turns slowly in the evening breeze. Its gentle creaking echoes across the empty fields. You pause beside an old stone well. A rusty bucket still hangs from the rope. Someone must have lowered it thousands of times. Morning after morning, year after year, fetching water, living an ordinary life. You wonder what became of the family who once lived here. Did they leave? Did they survive? Or did the war simply arrive one morning and change everything forever? No one knows. No one can know. War rarely leaves tidy answers behind. The squad camps beside the village that night. For once, there are actual walls to lean against. Not comfortable walls. Not intact walls. But walls nonetheless. The medic quietly lights a tiny lantern inside one of the damaged houses while treating a soldier's blistered feet. The warm glow spills softly through the broken doorway. It feels strangely welcoming, almost like home. Charlie finds an old wooden chair with only 3 legs. He carefully balances on it anyway. It'll do. You smile. You've lowered your standards. He looks around the ruined house. I think Okinawa lowered them for me. After dinner, the rain finally stops completely. Clouds drift apart, one by one. Stars begin appearing overhead. More stars than you've seen in weeks. The entire squad quietly steps outside. Nobody says much. There is something about a clear night sky that naturally encourages silence. The sergeant finally speaks. My grandfather used to know every constellation. Charlie points upward. I only know the Big Dipper. The medic laughs. I thought that was a saucepan. Several men chuckle. You simply continue looking upward. Somewhere beneath this very same sky, your parents might be finishing dinner. Children are probably riding bicycles down quiet streets. Couples are walking hand in hand. Somewhere, life continues exactly as it always has. The thought brings unexpected comfort. The stars don't belong to war. They belong to everyone. Before turning in, you sit beside your flamethrower one final time. A habit has quietly formed. Every evening, you inspect it once more before sleeping. Pressure valve, harness buckles, fuel hose, ignition assembly. Everything exactly as it should be. Satisfied, you gently cover it with a canvas cloth. Charlie notices. You treat that thing better than your rifle. You smile. My rifle never tried to throw me off a cliff. He laughs softly. Fair point. The lanterns around camp gradually go out, one by one, until only moonlight remains. You climb into your foxhole. The earth is still damp beneath your blanket. The air smells of wet grass and fresh rain instead of smoke. For tonight, that is enough. You close your eyes. Tomorrow, the march will continue. The jungle will close around the patrol once more. The heavy steel tanks will return to your shoulders. But for this one quiet night, under a sky full of stars, you allow yourself to remember that beyond every battlefield, there is still a world worth returning to. By the third week, you notice something curious. People have stopped calling you by your name. Not intentionally, not cruelly. It simply happens. Flame team, the operator, the flamer, the tank. Even officers you've spoken with before now point in your direction and say, "Send the flamethrower." Not, "Send him." At first, you barely notice. There are larger things to worry about than words. But over time, the difference begins to matter. A rifleman carries a rifle. A medic carries bandages. A radio operator carries messages. Yet somehow, you begin feeling as though you are no longer carrying the flamethrower. The flamethrower is carrying your identity. The morning patrol begins beneath another cloudless sky. The rain has finally given the island a short break. Sunlight filters through the jungle canopy, casting long golden beams across the forest floor. For once, you can actually hear birds. Not many, just enough to remind everyone that nature is slowly reclaiming the silence. Charlie walks beside you. You know what today is? You think for a moment. Wednesday. He laughs. I have absolutely no idea. So, what is it? My birthday. You stop walking for half a second. Seriously? He nods. 21. You smile. Happy birthday. He shrugs. Not exactly how I imagined spending it. No birthday cake. No. Party. No. Presents. He taps his muddy boots. I got trench foot. You both laugh. The sound echoes softly through the trees. Behind you, even the sergeant smiles. Happy birthday, Charlie. The young soldier grins. Thanks, Sarge. Can I have the day off? No. The entire squad chuckles. For a few wonderful moments, the war disappears. Around midday, the patrol reaches another abandoned farm. Unlike the previous villages, this one remains almost untouched. The roof still stands. The front gate hangs slightly, crooked but remains attached. A rusted bicycle rests against the side of the house. One tire has completely rotted away. The other somehow still holds its shape. You stop looking at it. Your father's workshop immediately comes back into your mind. The smell of grease, rubber tires, fresh paint, tools hanging neatly from wooden walls. You can almost hear him saying, "Hand me the wrench." The memory feels so vivid that for one impossible second, you expect him to walk around the corner. Instead, only silence answers. Charlie notices where you're looking. You all right? You nod slowly. My dad repaired bicycles. Charlie studies the old frame leaning against the wall. You'll probably fix that one too someday. You smile. I'd like that. The squad pauses long enough to refill canteens. The medic quietly enters the farmhouse. A few moments later, he walks back outside carrying an old kettle. Still good. The sergeant laughs. You planning on making tea? The medic shrugs. If we survive, we're having proper tea. One rifleman raises an eyebrow. Out here? Why not? Someone else finds several chipped ceramic cups inside a cupboard. None match. One has a cracked handle. Another is painted with faded blue flowers. The third has no handle at all. Charlie carefully lines them on a table. For several minutes, the entire squad stands quietly looking at them. Such ordinary objects, completely out of place. They aren't military. They don't belong to the army. They belong to someone's home. Someone who once sat exactly where you're standing now. Someone who probably never imagined strangers from another continent would one day drink from their cups. The sergeant gently places them back inside the cupboard. Leave them. No one argues. Some things deserve to remain exactly where they were found. The afternoon passes without contact. No hidden caves. No artillery. No rifle fire. Just another long march. Through rolling hills. As the sun begins sinking lower, the jungle changes color. Deep green becomes soft gold. Long shadows stretch across the narrow trails. The air cools slightly, enough to make breathing easier. Charlie quietly walks beside you. You know, I've been thinking. You laugh. Again? Yeah. He grins. I should probably stop. You probably should. He looks ahead. When this is over, I'm never carrying another backpack. You glance at the steel tanks on your shoulders. What about hiking? Nope. Camping? Nope. School books? No chance. You smile. I think you'll change your mind. He shrugs. Maybe. But if I ever carry 70 pounds again, I want someone paying me. Camp is established beside another narrow stream. The water flows gently over smooth limestone. Several men remove their boots to dry surf feet. The medic insists everyone air their socks. Nobody enjoys the instruction. Everyone obeys anyway. The smell is unforgettable. Charlie wrinkles his nose dramatically. I think we've discovered a new chemical weapon. Even the sergeant laughs. If the Japanese smell this, they'll surrender. Laughter spreads across the camp. Longer this time. War has a strange way of making terrible jokes genuinely funny. That evening, the mail clerk unexpectedly arrives again. Only 3 letters today. None for you. Charlie receives one. He quietly opens it beneath the fading light. Several photographs slip onto his lap. His younger sister. His parents. A dog sitting proudly beside a mailbox. He smiles. Then unexpectedly, hands you one photograph. That's Max. The dog. Charlie nods. Thinks he's smarter than everyone. You study the picture. Max certainly looks like he believes that. You hand it back carefully. He's probably waiting for you. Charlie folds the photograph gently. I hope so. Night settles peacefully over the jungle. You finish. Another careful inspection of the flamethrower. Every buckle. Every hose. Every valve. Routine. Always routine. Before climbing into your foxhole, you glance once more toward Charlie. He's asleep already. One arm tucked beneath his helmet. His unopened birthday chocolate wrapper still sticking slightly from his pocket. You smile quietly. 21 years old. Thousands of miles from home. Spending his birthday in a muddy foxhole beside strangers who somehow no longer feel like strangers. You realize something then. The army didn't simply assign you a squad. It quietly gave you a second family. Not one you expected. Not one you chose. But one you would gladly carry alongside the heavy steel tanks on your back. Because in a place where tomorrow is never guaranteed, friendship becomes one of the few things lighter than hope, yet stronger than fear. A few days later, the weather finally clears. Not completely, just enough for the morning sun to break through the clouds in scattered beams, painting the jungle in soft gold. The ground remains soaked from weeks of rain. Mud clings stubbornly to your boots. Every step makes a quiet sucking sound. By now, no one notices anymore. The patrol has been moving since dawn. Your squad has been assigned to advance alongside another infantry platoon, pushing toward a series of ridges overlooking the southern part of the island. You immediately notice something different. The new soldiers keep looking at you. Not openly, just brief glances. Then they quickly look away. One young private, who can't be older than 19, quietly whispers to another man. That's the flamethrower. You pretend not to hear. The older corporal beside him notices. He quietly elbows the young soldier. Don't stare. The private immediately looks embarrassed. Sorry. You simply nod. It's all right. Truthfully, you've become used to it. People always notice the tanks before they notice you. The march continues through dense bamboo. The stalks sway gently in the breeze, knocking softly against one another like hollow wind chimes. It is one of the few pleasant sounds left on Okinawa. Charlie quietly walks beside you. You ever think about how heavy that thing actually is? You smile. Every 5 minutes. He grins. I mean, he gestures toward the tanks. Not just the weight. You understand immediately. Neither of you says anything for a while. Eventually, you answer, yeah, I think about that too. Near midday, the platoon halts. Scouts have discovered another defensive position. This one isn't hidden underground. Instead, it's built into the side of a rocky cliff. From below, it appears almost impossible to reach. Machine gun positions overlook the narrow trail winding toward the top. Several small openings are visible beneath reinforced logs and stone. The lieutenant studies the position through binoculars. Strong. The sergeant nods. They've chosen good ground. Artillery is requested. Several minutes later, the familiar thunder begins. Shells crash against the hillside. Dust rises. Small trees snap. Loose rocks tumble down the slope. When the smoke finally clears, the openings remain. Scarred, but still there. The lieutenant quietly lowers the binoculars. They'll have to be cleared. His eyes move toward you. Not unkindly. Simply, matter-of-factly. The same look you've seen dozens of times now. The climb is slow. Painfully slow. The trail zigzags upward between jagged limestone outcroppings. Your boots struggle for traction. Loose stones roll beneath your feet. The flamethrower presses relentlessly against your shoulders. Halfway up, you stop to catch your breath. The sergeant notices. No rush. We're coming with you. You nod gratefully. No one ever sends you alone. That thought brings comfort. When the squad reaches the first fighting position, everything becomes quiet again. The machine gun team settles behind several large rocks. Riflemen spread out across the hillside. Charlie kneels only a few feet behind you. If anything happens, he says quietly, I'm right here. You smile. I know. You move forward. Every action feels familiar now. Inspect. Unlock. Ignite. The tiny blue pilot flame appears. Weeks ago, its soft hiss filled you with dread. Now, it simply tells you the equipment is working exactly as designed. You kneel beside the rocky opening. Take one steady breath. Then another. The jungle breeze gently brushes against your face. You briefly remember something your father once said while repairing an old bicycle. Don't rush difficult jobs. Asterisk. The extra minute you spend now might save an hour later. Asterisk. Funny how memories appear at unexpected moments. You tighten your grip. Aim carefully. A short burst of flame disappears into the fortified position. Heat rolls back across the stone, washing over your face like the opening of an enormous oven. 1001. 1002. Release. Smoke curls upward. The squad waits. The silence feels endless. Then, the sergeant gives a slow nod. Move. The riflemen advance. Moments later, a voice calls back. Clear. No cheering. No celebration. Just another difficult task completed. The climb continues. The second position proves easier. The third, harder. By the time the ridge is finally secured, the afternoon sun hangs low above the jungle. Everyone is exhausted. Charlie drops his pack beside a fallen tree. I swear. He wipes sweat from his forehead. This island keeps getting steeper. Miller laughs. I think the hills move at night. The medic joins in. I've treated enough sore knees to believe him. Even the lieutenant smiles. You boys complain too much. Charlie grins. We're professionals. That evening, the platoon finally reaches the top of the ridge. The view steals everyone's attention. For the first time in weeks, you can see the ocean again. Far in the distance, tiny ships move slowly across brilliant blue water. Beyond them, nothing but the endless Pacific. The same ocean that carried you here. You wonder how many miles lie between this ridge and home. Too many to imagine. Charlie stands beside you. Looks peaceful. It does. He folds his arms. Funny. What? From out there. He points toward the sea. This island probably looks beautiful. You nod slowly. It still is. He looks surprised. You continue. The war isn't Okinawa. The war is just. You search for the right words. Something happening to Okinawa. Charlie thinks about that for a long moment. Finally, I hope one day. It's just an island again. You don't answer, because you hope exactly the same thing. The evening breeze carries the scent of salt water up the hillside. For the first time since landing, it almost feels fresh. You close your eyes, take one slow breath, then quietly shoulder the flamethrower once more. The campaign isn't over. Not yet, but somewhere beyond the horizon, beyond the sea, beyond the smoke. Home still waits patiently, and with every ridge your squad crosses, it feels just a little closer. Not every day in war is filled with gunfire. History books rarely mention that. They skip from one battle to the next. One victory, one defeat, one dramatic moment after another. But those who lived through it understood something different. Most days were spent waiting. Waiting for orders. Waiting for supplies. Waiting for the rain to stop. Waiting for someone to tell you which hill mattered next. And strangely, the waiting could be almost as exhausting as the fighting. Your squad receives orders to hold its current position while engineers clear roads farther south. No patrols, no assaults. Simply wait. The ridge you've captured overlooks several miles of broken countryside. From here you can see shell craters scattered across the hills like giant footprints. Burned-out trucks rest beside muddy roads. Columns of smoke rise lazily from places too distant to identify. Yet here, on this ridge, everything feels unusually calm. The breeze is cool. The birds have returned. Even butterflies drift between patches of wildflowers growing stubbornly among shattered rocks. Charlie notices them first. Would you look at that? A bright yellow butterfly lands briefly on the barrel of Miller's rifle. Nobody moves. For several quiet seconds, it simply sits there, completely unaware of uniforms, completely unaware of war. Then it gently flutters away. Miller watches it disappear. I think that's the bravest thing I've seen all week. With nowhere to march, everyone finally has time for small jobs that have been ignored for days. Boots are repaired, buttons sewn back onto uniforms, helmets cleaned. The medic insists everyone drink more water. Nobody argues. The tropical heat has become relentless. You sit beneath a broad tree with the flamethrower laid carefully across your knees. Slowly, you begin taking it apart. The nozzle first, then the ignition assembly. Each bolt comes free with familiar resistance. Charlie watches. I swear, you know that thing better than I know my own rifle. You smile. I hope so. He raises an eyebrow. Why? Because if your rifle breaks, you'll probably still be all right. He looks at the steel tanks. If this breaks, neither of you finishes the sentence. There is no need. The sergeant quietly walks over. He crouches beside you without saying anything. For several moments, he simply watches your hands work. You've gotten quicker. You continue cleaning the regulator. I've had practice. He nods. That's not what I mean. You stop. He points toward the flamethrower. 3 weeks ago, you handled it like it was made of glass. He smiles faintly. Now, you handle it like it's part of you. You aren't sure whether that's a compliment. The afternoon drifts by almost peacefully. Someone discovers an old harmonica tucked inside a rucksack. The instrument has seen better days. Several notes refuse to cooperate. Others sound strangely flat. Even so, the music somehow fills the camp with warmth. Charlie laughs. I think it sounds awful. The harmonica player shrugs. It does. But it's better than silence. No one disagrees. As the sun begins dropping toward the horizon, the squad gathers to eat. Someone has managed to trade for a small tin of peaches. Real peaches. Not powdered. Not dried. Actual fruit. The sergeant opens the tin carefully. He studies the handful of slices floating inside. 12 men. 8 peaches. Charlie grins. Math was never my strongest subject. The medic pulls out a pocket knife. We'll make it work. Each slice is cut into smaller pieces. Tiny portions. Hardly more than a single bite. When your turn comes, you place the piece into your mouth. Sweet. Cold. Juicy. For one astonishing moment, You are no longer on Okinawa. You're sitting at your family's kitchen table on a summer afternoon. Your mother has just sliced fresh fruit from the market. The windows are open. A gentle breeze carries the smell of freshly cut grass. Someone down the street is mowing a lawn. A bicycle bell rings somewhere nearby. The memory lasts only a heartbeat. Then, you're back beneath the jungle trees, holding an empty tin cup. Charlie notices your smile. Good. You nod. Best peach I've ever tasted. He laughs. I was thinking exactly the same thing. Funny, how the smallest comforts become the greatest luxuries. That evening, the lieutenant climbs the ridge carrying a folded map. His expression immediately tells everyone the quiet. Days are ending. He spreads the map across a wooden crate. We move tomorrow. Nobody looks surprised. Fresh reconnaissance photographs reveal another defensive network farther south. Stronger, larger, built into a series of limestone escarpments. The lieutenant taps the map. They've turned these hills into a maze. The engineers have marked more than 20 suspected tunnel entrances. 20. Charlie whistles softly. That's going to take a while. The lieutenant nods. It will. Then his eyes settle briefly on you. And they'll need every flamethrower team available. The words hang in the evening air. You quietly fold your mother's letter and slip it back into your breast pocket. Tomorrow, the waiting ends again. Long after darkness settles across the ridge, you remain awake. The flamethrower rests beside your foxhole. You reach over and place one hand against the cool steel. Not because you feel attached to it. Because tomorrow, the familiar weight will once again settle across your shoulders. The stars above shine brighter than you've seen in weeks. You wonder if your parents might be looking at the very same sky tonight. Perhaps your father has already locked the workshop for the evening. Perhaps your mother is washing the dinner dishes. Perhaps they are wondering where their son is. You hope, somehow, they can feel that you're still alive. The breeze gently stirs the trees overhead. You close your eyes. Tomorrow, the march begins again. Tomorrow, you'll become the man sent first once more. But tonight, for a few precious hours, you are simply someone's son, looking at the same stars that shine over home. ## Chapter 17, into the Shuri line. The next morning, the air feels different. Not because the weather has changed, because every man in the company knows where they're going. The Shuri line. Even if you've never seen it, you've heard about it. Every soldier has. Whispers pass through camps faster than official reports ever could. They've turned the hills into fortresses. The tunnels go on for miles. You clear one bunker, and another opens behind you. No one knows exactly how much of those stories is true, but everyone agrees on one thing. Whatever lies ahead will be harder than anything you've faced so far. The column leaves camp before first light. The jungle slowly wakes around you. Birds call somewhere high above the trees. Morning mist clings to the valleys below. For a brief moment, the island feels untouched, peaceful. You almost forget that thousands of soldiers are moving through these hills at the exact same moment. Entire divisions, artillery batteries, medical units, engineers, tank crews, everyone slowly pushing south. History often speaks about battles as though they happen in a single place. The reality is much larger. The battlefield stretches for miles. Thousands of individual stories unfolding all at once. Yours is only one of them. By mid-morning, the terrain changes. The jungle begins thinning. Large limestone ridges dominate the landscape. Natural cliffs rise from the earth like enormous stone walls. The engineers study them carefully. One finally mutters, "Perfect defensive ground." The sergeant quietly agrees. "If I had to defend an island," he looks across the ridges, "I'd choose this." Every hill seems to hide another valley. Every valley another cave. Every cave another unknown. The advance slows almost immediately. The engineers move to the front. Their long steel probes search carefully through the muddy ground. Every suspicious patch of earth receives attention. Every unusual pile of stones. Every section of freshly disturbed soil. War has taught everyone something. If something looks out of place, it probably isn't an accident. Charlie walks beside you. I used to think rocks were just rocks. You smile. And now, he points toward the hillside. Now every rock looks suspicious. You laugh quietly. I know exactly what you mean. Shortly after noon, the first obstacle appears. Not enemy fire. A destroyed bridge. The small wooden crossing has collapsed into the creek below. The engineers immediately begin working. Several trees are cut. Heavy ropes are stretched across the gap. Improvised planks slowly replace the missing bridge. The entire process takes nearly 2 hours. No one complains. Everyone simply waits. Patience has become another piece of military equipment, just as important as rifles or ammunition. While waiting, you sit beneath a tree cleaning dried mud from the flamethrower's harness. An older engineer wanders over. He studies the weapon quietly. Haven't seen one of those up close before. You glance toward him. Neither had I. He smiles. Heavy. You laugh softly. Heavier every day. The engineer nods. I build bridges. You carry fire. He scratches his chin thoughtfully. Funny how everybody ends up with their own strange job. You think about that after he leaves. He's right. The medic carries hope. The radio operator carries information. The engineer carries solutions. You carry one of the Army's most unusual tools. No wonder people remember the tanks before they remember your face. That afternoon, the company reaches the edge of a broad valley. The lieutenant raises his binoculars. For several long minutes, he studies the opposite ridge. Then, without saying a word, he hands the binoculars to the sergeant. The sergeant looks. His expression immediately changes. You know that look. It means they've found something. Several minutes later, the officers quietly gather around a map. No one else is invited. The discussion remains hushed. Occasionally, someone points toward the distant hillside. Finally, the sergeant walks back. Looks like another defensive network. Charlie sighs. Of course it is. The sergeant smiles faintly. You sound disappointed. I was hoping for something easier. If you find it, the sergeant says, let me know. Even he laughs. Camp is established before sunset. Nobody advances after dark unless absolutely necessary. The jungle has already taught everyone why. You remove the flamethrower with another grateful sigh. The familiar ache returns immediately. Your shoulders feel strangely light, almost floating. Charlie notices you stretching again. You know, I think the sergeant was right. What about? Remember what he said? One day you'll take the tank off and still feel like you're carrying it. Charlie nods. I've been thinking about that. So have I. Neither of you says anything else. Some thoughts don't need finishing. Dinner is simple. Canned meat, hard crackers, coffee. The medic somehow finds a handful of wild mint growing near the stream. He adds a few leaves to the boiling water. The entire pot suddenly smells wonderful. Charlie takes one sip. That's cheating. The medic smiles. What is? Making army coffee taste almost good. Everyone laughs. The sound drifts quietly across the valley. For a few minutes, you could almost imagine this is nothing more than a camping trip. Friends sitting together beneath the stars, sharing stories, passing around hot drinks. Then, far away, artillery rumbles across the hills. A deep rolling sound that reminds everyone exactly where they are. Nobody says anything. The silence returns naturally. The war has a way of interrupting even the happiest moments. Before climbing into your foxhole, you walk a few yards away from camp. The valley stretches silently before you beneath the moonlight. Somewhere out there, hidden among the limestone ridges, another maze of caves waits. Tomorrow, you'll begin walking toward it. You take one long breath of cool night air, then quietly return to camp. Another march awaits. Another hill. Another cave. Another ordinary day. Inside one of history's most extraordinary wars. The attack begins before sunrise. Not with shouting. Not with bugles. Not even with gunfire. It begins with men quietly tightening bootlaces beneath a sky still filled with stars. No one needs reminding what today's objective is. The officers have already explained it twice. The maps have been studied, the routes memorized, the artillery schedules confirmed. Now, there is nothing left to do except walk. You shoulder the flamethrower. The familiar weight settles across your back. The straps find the same bruises they have found every morning for nearly a month. They no longer hurt immediately. Instead, they remind you exactly where yesterday ended. The company moves through the darkness in single file. No cigarettes. No unnecessary conversation. Even canteens have been wrapped in cloth to prevent them from rattling. The only sounds are boots pressing into damp earth, equipment shifting, and breathing. Lots of breathing. You glance upward. The stars are beginning to fade. Morning is coming. When the first light reaches the hills, the valley finally reveals itself. It is larger than anyone expected. Limestone cliffs rise in every direction. Deep ravines divide the landscape into natural compartments. Every ridge overlooks another. Every cave overlooks another trail. It is easy to understand why the Japanese chose this ground. Nature has already built most of the fortress for them. All they had to do was move in. The lieutenant studies the valley through binoculars. No movement. The sergeant quietly replies, "That worries me." Everyone understands why. By now, silence has become suspicious. Whenever the jungle grows too quiet, something is usually waiting. The advance continues. Halfway across the valley floor, the point man suddenly raises his fist. The entire company freezes. Nobody speaks. The engineers slowly move forward. One kneels beside what appears to be an ordinary patch of grass. He gently brushes away several loose leaves. Underneath, a narrow ventilation shaft, barely 6 inches wide, almost invisible. The engineer whistles softly. "They're underneath us." You feel a chill despite the tropical heat. The tunnels aren't ahead anymore. They're directly below your boots. Within minutes, 3 more ventilation shafts are discovered. Then another. Then another. Like tiny chimneys scattered across the hillside. The lieutenant quietly folds his map. This entire valley is connected. No one says anything. There is nothing encouraging about that realization. Artillery is called once again. Minutes later, the peaceful valley erupts. Heavy shells crash into the ridges one after another. The ground shakes beneath your boots. Dust rises hundreds of feet into the air. Trees collapse. Loose rock tumbles down steep slopes. The bombardment continues for nearly 15 minutes. Long enough that conversation becomes impossible. Long enough that your chest vibrates with every explosion. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stops. Silence. Only drifting smoke remains. The company waits. Everyone watches the hills. Nothing moves. The lieutenant lowers his binoculars. They'll still be down there. The sergeant nods. They always are. The first tunnel entrance is finally located beneath a shattered stone wall. Unlike previous caves, this entrance has heavy timber supports reinforcing the ceiling. Sandbags line both sides. Someone spent months building it. You quietly kneel. The routine begins again. Pressure, ignition, harness, pilot light. Your hands move almost automatically. Months ago, these steps felt complicated. Now, they feel almost as natural as tying your boots. The tiny blue flame appears beneath the nozzle. Steady, reliable, waiting. The sergeant crouches beside you. You know the drill. You nod. He doesn't offer a speech. Neither of you needs one. You slowly approach the entrance. The tunnel descends sharply into darkness. Cool air drifts outward. It smells of damp limestone, wet earth, old timber. You wonder how many men have walked through this entrance before today. Builders, engineers, soldiers. Perhaps they carried supplies through here, shared meals, laughed, complained, tried to make another ordinary day feel ordinary. War has a habit of making enemies seem distant. Places like this quietly remind you that someone else has also been trying to survive. You steady the nozzle. Take one long breath. Aim slightly downward, exactly as instructed. The trigger moves beneath your finger. A bright stream of flame disappears into the tunnel. Heat rushes back toward your face. The timber supports glow briefly before vanishing behind thick smoke. 1001. 1002. Release. The roar fades. Only the crackling echo remains. The tunnel exhales a slow cloud of gray smoke. The company waits. 30 seconds. 1 minute. No movement. The sergeant quietly signals 2 riflemen. They advance cautiously. Moments later, one calls back. Clear. The company moves forward. By late afternoon, 3 more tunnel entrances have been secured. Each one different. Each one hidden. Each one demanding the same careful discipline. You notice something as the day wears on. The flamethrower feels heavier than usual. Not physically. Your shoulders already know how to carry 70 pounds. The weight comes from somewhere else. Perhaps fatigue. Perhaps weeks of constant vigilance. Perhaps simply knowing that tomorrow, there will almost certainly be another tunnel. Another ridge. Another careful walk toward another dark opening. The company finally halts as the sun begins disappearing behind the western hills. No one has much energy left. Charlie drops his pack beside a tree and immediately sits down. I don't think my legs belong to me anymore. Miller stretches both knees. I'm not convinced mine still work. Even the sergeant lowers himself onto a rock with a tired sigh. For several minutes, no one speaks. The silence feels comfortable. Shared exhaustion requires very few words. As darkness settles across the valley, you remove the flamethrower one slow movement at a time. The steel tanks touch the ground with a soft metallic thud. You roll your shoulders carefully. The familiar ache spreads through your back. Charlie notices. Still hurts. You nod. Every day. He smiles. Good. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. I figure. The day it stops hurting is probably the day we should start worrying. You laugh quietly. So we're both safe then. The stars slowly appear overhead. Another day has ended. Tomorrow, the company will continue deeper into the maze beneath Okinawa. And once again, when they reach another dark entrance hidden beneath limestone, you already know who they'll send first. War has an unusual way of shrinking the world. Before you enlisted, the world felt enormous. Cities, states, countries, oceans, everything seemed impossibly far apart. Now, your entire world fits inside a few hundred yards. The man walking in front of you, the man behind you, the next ridgeline, the next meal, the next sunrise. Anything beyond that feels almost impossible to imagine. The company pushes farther south. The hills become steeper, the valleys narrower. Every ridge seems designed by nature to slow an advancing army. You begin noticing something else. The trees are changing. Many stand splintered from artillery. Others lean at impossible angles after weeks of bombardment. Yet, among the destruction, bright green shoots continue growing from broken branches. Tiny flowers bloom beside shell craters. Life refuses to surrender. Charlie notices them too. Nature's stubborn. You nod. So are people. He smiles. Good thing. Around mid-morning, the patrol reaches another abandoned settlement. Unlike the previous villages, this one still feels lived in. Cooking pots remain inside homes. Children's sandals sit neatly beside a doorway. A broom still leans against a wall. Someone left in a hurry. Perhaps yesterday. Perhaps weeks ago. No one knows. The company moves quietly through the empty streets. Nobody enters the houses unless necessary. Nobody disturbs what has been left behind. The sergeant quietly says, "Respect the homes." Simple words. Everyone understands. Near the edge of the village, you notice something sitting on a small wooden porch. A child's spinning top. Bright red paint. Slightly chipped. No larger than your palm. You stop for only a second. Someone once laughed while playing with this. Someone probably cried when they lost it. Someone's mother probably called them inside for dinner. Now, only silence answers. Charlie notices you looking. Leave it. You nod. I wasn't going to touch it. The two of you continue walking. Sometimes, The smallest objects carry the greatest weight. The village ends where another line of limestone cliffs begins. Almost immediately, the patrol slows. The terrain ahead looks familiar. Too familiar. Steep walls, dense vegetation, perfect hiding places. The lieutenant quietly studies the map. Expect tunnels. No one seems surprised anymore. The engineers move ahead. One probe, then another. Slowly, patiently, searching for entrances invisible to everyone else. Nearly 40 minutes pass before one of them finally raises his hand. Found one. You aren't even curious anymore where the sergeant's eyes will turn. They always find you. Not because anyone enjoys asking. Because everyone understands your role. The sergeant walks over. You good? You nod. He studies your face for a moment. You tired? You think honestly. Yes. So is everyone else. He smiles gently. Let's finish today's work. The tunnel entrance hides beneath tangled roots at the base of an enormous banyan tree. Without the engineers, no one would ever have noticed it. You kneel. Remove your gloves. Flex stiff fingers. Then put the gloves back on. Little rituals. Tiny habits. Everyone has them. Charlie always tightens his helmet twice before moving forward. The medic always checks his bandages one final time. The sergeant quietly taps the compass hanging from his webbing. You always take one slow breath before igniting the pilot flame. Click. Blue flame. Steady. Reliable. Familiar. You realize something. Months ago, fire seemed terrifying. Now, the silence before the fire feels even more unsettling. You move into position. The riflemen settle behind you. Nobody speaks. The jungle itself seems to hold its breath. You aim. The trigger moves. Another brief stream of flame disappears into darkness. Exactly 2 seconds. Exactly as practiced. Smoke rolls outward. You step back. Wait. The familiar rhythm repeats itself once again. When the riflemen finally clear the entrance, the sergeant simply nods. Good. No medals. No applause. Just one quiet word. Good. Strangely, it feels enough. That afternoon, the company pauses beside a small stream. Everyone removes helmets. Several soldiers splash cool water across dusty faces. Charlie kneels beside the water. You know what I miss most? You smile. I thought we'd already covered breakfast. He laughs. We did. He skips a small stone across the stream. My little sister. You glance toward him. How old? 10. He smiles softly. Every Sunday morning, she'd wake me up before sunrise. For what? Fishing. You chuckle. So you miss fishing? He shakes his head. No. I miss pretending I didn't want to go. You laugh quietly. He continues watching the water. I'd complain every single week. Another stone skips twice before sinking. I'd give just about anything to have her wake me up one more time. Neither of you speaks after that. Some memories don't need answering. As evening approaches, the clouds finally disappear completely. The sunset spreads brilliant shades of orange and crimson across the Okinawan sky. Even the oldest soldiers stop for a moment to look. The medic quietly says, "My wife would have painted this." Charlie nods. "My sister would have tried." The sergeant smiles. "My grandson probably would have spilled the paint." Everyone laughs. The sound carries gently across the valley. For just a moment, no one is thinking about tomorrow. Only the colors overhead, the cool evening breeze, the peaceful silence. Camp is established beside another rocky hillside. Dinner finishes quickly. Most of the squad falls asleep almost immediately. You remain awake a little longer. Not because you aren't tired, because you find yourself thinking about faces. Your mother's smile. Your father's grease-stained hands. Charlie's little sister, even though you've never met her. The engineer who builds bridges. The medic who carries lavender hand cream. The sergeant who rarely raises his voice. War has introduced you to hundreds of people. Yet somehow, you realize you no longer remember many faces from before the army. That thought frightens you. So before closing your eyes, you quietly take your mother's letter from your pocket. You read it again. Not because you've forgotten the words. Because you're determined, never to forget the faces waiting behind them. Tomorrow, the campaign will continue. The hills will rise once more. The tunnels will wait patiently beneath the limestone. But tonight, beneath a sky filled with stars, you allow yourself one final thought before sleep. When this war is finally over, you don't want to remember the caves, or the flamethrower, or even the battles. You want to remember the people, because in the end, history may record victories and defeats, but the heart remembers faces. By early June, the campaign begins to change. Not dramatically, not all at once. War rarely announces its turning points. Instead, you notice them in small ways. The artillery fires a little farther ahead each morning. Supply trucks begin reaching places that seemed impossible only weeks before. Maps are crossed out more often than new objectives are added. The company keeps moving. South. Always south. One ridge at a time. The weather remains unpredictable. One morning begins beneath clear blue skies. By lunchtime, dark clouds roll in from the sea. By evening, another warm rain washes across the hills. The island seems determined to remind everyone that nature follows its own schedule, not the army's. Charlie pulls his poncho tighter around his shoulders. I've forgotten what dry socks feel like. The medic laughs. I've forgotten what dry anything feels like. Even the sergeant smiles. If anyone finds sunshine, put in a request. The day's march leads the company toward another limestone escarpment overlooking a narrow valley. The ridge itself appears ordinary enough. Broken trees, tall grass, scattered boulders. But experience has taught everyone not to trust appearances. The lieutenant quietly studies the hillside. Looks empty. The sergeant answers without hesitation. It isn't. By now, those two words have become almost routine. It isn't. The engineers spread out once again. Their long steel probes disappear into damp earth. One step. Pause. Another step. Pause. Nobody rushes them. Nobody ever does. The patience of engineers has saved more lives than anyone could count. Nearly an hour passes before one of them whistles softly. Then another. Soon, 3 tunnel entrances have been located, each hidden beneath roots and fallen branches, each almost invisible from only a few feet away. The lieutenant quietly folds his map. We'll clear them. He doesn't need to say who will go first. You kneel beside the nearest entrance. The familiar ritual begins. Pressure gauge, harness, fuel valve, ignition, click. The tiny blue pilot flame appears exactly as it has dozens of times before. Its soft hiss has become one of the most familiar sounds of your life. Funny, how quickly human beings adapt. Weeks ago, that sound filled you with fear. Now, it simply tells you the equipment is ready. You wonder if you'll ever hear a camping stove again without thinking of Okinawa. The sergeant crouches beside you. You know, he says quietly, when this war's over, I'm never looking at another cave. You smile. I was thinking the same thing. He chuckles softly. Problem is, he looks toward the dark entrance. I'll probably dream about them anyway. Neither of you says anything else. Some thoughts don't require answers. You move forward. The rest of the squad quietly takes their positions. Charlie settles behind a large rock. The machine gun team watches the surrounding ridge. The medic waits farther back. Everyone knows exactly where they belong. Months ago, this level of coordination would have seemed impossible. Now, it happens almost without words. You realize something. You've stopped thinking of yourself as 12 individual soldiers. You've become one team, one moving machine, each person depending completely on everyone else. The familiar burst of flame disappears into the darkness. Exactly 2 seconds. Exactly as practiced. Heat rolls outward. Smoke drifts lazily into the afternoon air. The riflemen advance only after the sergeant gives permission. Moments later, the signal comes back. Clear. The second entrance follows. Then the third, each requiring the same patience, the same discipline, the same trust. By late afternoon, the hillside belongs to the company. At least, as much as any battlefield ever belongs to anyone. As the sun begins sinking, the lieutenant receives another radio message. He studies it quietly before folding the paper. The sergeant notices. Something changed. The lieutenant nods. Reports say Japanese resistance is beginning to weaken. Nobody celebrates. Not yet. Rumors have traveled through the army before. Many proved wrong. Still, the words quietly settle into everyone's thoughts. Could it really be ending? Charlie walks beside you as camp is established. You think it's true? You shrug. I don't know. You hope. You smile faintly. I've hoped every day. Charlie looks toward the western sky. I stopped letting myself think about the end. Why? Because. He searches for the right words. Tomorrow always seemed closer. That evening, the company gathers beneath several large trees. Someone has managed to boil fresh coffee. Real coffee. Not wonderful, but better than usual. The aroma drifts gently through camp. One rifleman quietly remarks, "You know what I'm going to miss?" Everyone looks at him in surprise. Miss? He nods. Not the marching. Definitely not the rain. A few men laugh. I'm going to miss. He looks around the circle. You idiots. The laughter grows louder this time. Charlie points toward him. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever called me. Even the lieutenant smiles. For several wonderful minutes, the camp feels less like an army, and more like a group of old friends sitting together after a long day's work. Later, long after everyone else has fallen asleep, you remain awake beneath a sky overflowing with stars. The flamethrower rests quietly beside your foxhole. You study its familiar shape, the dents in the steel, the scratches across the harness, the faded paint worn away by weeks of use. It no longer looks like a strange machine. It looks tired, just like you. You gently run one hand across the cold metal. Not with affection, not exactly, more like respect. It carried you through weeks of the hardest days of your life. Tomorrow, perhaps it will again. Or perhaps, if the rumors are true, its work is almost finished. You close your eyes. The cool night breeze moves softly through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of artillery is quieter than yesterday. Not silent, just farther away. For the first time since arriving on Okinawa, you allow yourself to imagine something you haven't dared picture in weeks. A train station, your hometown, your mother waiting on the platform, your father wiping grease from his hands before pulling you into a hug, Charlie waving goodbye as he boards a different train. No helmets, no mud, no heavy steel tanks, just ordinary life. The kind of life that once seemed so ordinary. You barely noticed it. Now, it feels like the greatest prize in the world. The next morning, something feels different. It isn't the weather. The sky is still covered with drifting clouds. The ground is still wet beneath your boots. The air still smells of damp earth, smoke, and diesel fuel. Yet, something has changed. It takes you several minutes to realize what it is. The artillery. It has grown quieter. Not silent. Just less constant. For weeks, the thunder of heavy guns had become part of the landscape, almost like the wind or the rain. Now, long stretches pass without hearing a single shell. The silence feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. Charlie notices it too. You hear that. You look at him. What? He smiles. Exactly. The company continues its slow advance. Not because the officers expect fierce resistance around every corner anymore. Because experience has taught them never to assume anything. Every ridge is still approached carefully. Every abandoned position inspected. Every suspicious patch of earth examined by engineers before anyone steps forward. War has taught everyone patience. No one intends to forget those lessons simply because the fighting appears to be slowing. The morning passes without incident. No hidden tunnels. No machine gun fire. No hurried commands. Only long marches through hills scarred by weeks of combat. Nature has already begun reclaiming the battlefield. Small green plants push through shattered stone. Wildflowers bloom beside shell craters. Tiny birds dart between broken trees searching for insects. Life has returned before the armies have even left. The sight surprises you. The island seems eager to heal. Around noon, the company reaches a ridge overlooking the southern coastline. For the first time, you can clearly see the ocean stretching toward the horizon. The water sparkles beneath scattered sunlight. Ships still crowd the coastline. Supply vessels, hospital ships, destroyers quietly patrolling offshore. The lieutenant studies them for a moment. Hard to believe. He says softly, "That's how we arrived." Charlie nods. Feels like years ago. You quietly realize it almost does. The afternoon brings another surprise. A convoy heading north. Not south. North. Several trucks carry wounded soldiers toward field hospitals. Others transport exhausted infantry away from the front lines. One truck passes slowly beside your company. A soldier sitting in the back raises 2 fingers in a tired salute. Your sergeant returns it. Neither man smiles. Neither needs to. Both understand exactly what the other has survived. Later that day, your company reaches an abandoned observation post. Unlike most positions you've seen, this one remains remarkably intact. Inside the small bunker, someone has left behind a wooden stool, an enamel coffee cup, a calendar hanging crookedly from the wall. The pages flutter gently in the breeze drifting through the doorway. Charlie studies the calendar. It's strange. What is? It reminds you. He gestures around the bunker. That somebody else stood watch here. You nod. Probably every day. He quietly places the calendar back exactly where he found it. Neither of you says another word. As evening approaches, the lieutenant gathers the platoon. We've received updated reports. Everyone quietly listens. Enemy resistance continues collapsing across several sectors. A few soldiers exchange cautious glances. No cheering. Not yet. The lieutenant continues. We're still moving tomorrow. But, he folds the report. It may not be for much longer. Those words drift through the company like the evening breeze. Not much longer. No one quite knows what to do with that idea. For weeks, tomorrow always meant another battle. Another hill. Another cave. Now, tomorrow might mean something entirely different. That night, camp is unusually quiet. Not because people are frightened. Because they're thinking. Charlie sits beside you beneath a tree. You know what scares me? You glance toward him. What? He stares into the darkness. Going home. The answer surprises you. I thought that's all you've wanted. It is. He nods slowly. But, he struggles to explain. What if everyone expects me to be exactly the same? You understand immediately. Without meaning to. You reach over and tap the steel tank beside you. I don't think either of us is. Charlie looks at the flamethrower. No, I don't think so either. The two of you sit in silence. The jungle gently sways around the camp. Crickets begin singing once more. The sound seems louder now that artillery has grown quieter. Long after everyone else has gone to sleep, you find yourself staring at the flamethrower again. It leans against a tree exactly where you've placed it every evening for weeks. Its paint is scratched. The straps are worn smooth. The steel bears tiny dents collected from countless miles across Okinawa. You realize, it almost looks old. Not because of years. Because of everything it has endured in such a short time. You quietly remember the first day you saw it. Resting inside a wooden crate. It had seemed enormous then. Terrifying. Impossible. You had wondered how anyone could ever carry such a machine into battle. Now, you wonder something entirely different. How many more days will you have to? The answer may be closer than anyone dares to believe. Above the jungle, the stars slowly brighten. The breeze carries the faint smell of salt from the sea. You close your eyes. For the first time in many weeks, the sound that finally lulls you towards sleep isn't artillery. It isn't rifle fire. It isn't the rumble of distant explosions. It's simply the wind, moving gently through the trees. A few mornings later, you wake before the whistle. For a moment, you simply lie still, listening. The jungle is awake. Birds call somewhere beyond the trees. Water drips steadily from leaves after another night of light rain. A breeze moves gently through the bamboo. But something is missing. It takes several seconds before you realize what it is. There is no distant artillery, no deep rumble rolling across the hills, no steady reminder that thousands of guns are firing somewhere beyond the horizon. Only silence. The company prepares to move as usual. Boots tightened, helmets adjusted, equipment checked. You inspect the flamethrower with the same careful routine you've followed every morning for more than a month. Pressure gauge, harness, fuel lines, ignition assembly, everything perfect, everything ready, even though you secretly hope you won't need it today. The march feels different. Not easier. Simply lighter. The roads are busier now. Supply trucks move steadily north and south. Engineers repair bridges instead of destroying them. Medical units continue evacuating wounded, but now they're joined by trucks carrying construction materials. Telephone wire, timber, fuel. The army is already preparing for tomorrow, even while today's battle is still unfolding. Near midday, the company reaches another ridgeline. The lieutenant studies the valley below through binoculars. He keeps looking, longer than usual. Finally, he lowers the glasses. I don't see anything. The sergeant smiles faintly. I've been waiting a long time to hear you say that. The men quietly laugh. No one relaxes completely. Experience has taught everyone better. But something inside each soldier begins to believe. Maybe, just maybe, the worst is behind them. That afternoon, a jeep climbs the muddy trail toward your company. Dust clings to its tires. A captain steps out carrying several folded papers. The officers gather around him. No one else can hear the conversation, but everyone watches. The captain points toward the map. The lieutenant nods several times. The sergeant folds his arms. Then, something unexpected happens. The lieutenant smiles. Not a huge smile, just enough. He turns toward the company. Gather up. Everyone forms a loose semicircle. Helmets still on. Rifles still slung. The lieutenant looks at each face before speaking. The campaign on Okinawa. He pauses. Is officially over. Silence. Not because people don't understand. Because they do. Weeks of marching. Weeks of rain. Weeks of climbing hills. Weeks of carrying fear. And suddenly, someone has simply said, "It's over." Charlie quietly whispers beside you. Did he really say that? You nod. I think he did. No one cheers immediately. There is no dramatic celebration. No hats thrown into the air. Instead, the men simply stand there, almost uncertain what to do next. One rifleman quietly removes his helmet. Another sits down on a nearby rock. The medic closes his eyes for several long seconds. The sergeant slowly lights the cigarette he'd been saving for weeks. No words, no speeches, just quiet relief. Eventually, Charlie breaks the silence. So, he looks toward you. What now? You smile. I honestly don't know. Neither does anyone else. War had given every day a purpose. Wake up. Move forward. Complete the mission. Repeat. Now, for the first time in months. Tomorrow has no clear instructions. That evening, the atmosphere around camp is unlike anything you've experienced since arriving in the Pacific. Someone finds another harmonica. This one actually stays in tune. A few soldiers begin softly singing songs from home. The medic boils real coffee. Someone else somehow discovers a small tin of condensed milk. The coffee becomes sweeter than anything you've tasted in weeks. Charlie raises his cup. To dry socks. Everyone laughs. Miller raises his own cup. To real beds. The medic smiles. To sleeping without boots on. Finally, the sergeant quietly lifts his cup. To everyone who gets to go home. The laughter fades. Every man silently raises his mug. No one needs to explain the toast. Later that night, you sit alone beneath a tree. The flamethrower rests beside you one final time. Tomorrow, orders say the specialized equipment will be collected, returned to the depot, inspected, stored, perhaps never used again. You study the familiar steel tanks, the scratches, the dents, the faded paint. This machine has followed you across nearly every mile of Okinawa. You don't feel affection toward it, but you do feel something else. Respect. It demanded discipline every single day. It punished carelessness. It rewarded patience. In strange ways, it taught you as much about yourself as it did about war. You slowly stand. Grip the shoulder straps one last time. Lift it onto your back, just to feel the weight. 70 pounds. Exactly as always. You walk a few slow steps across the quiet camp. Then, just as carefully, you remove it again. The tanks touch the ground with a gentle metallic thud. For several long moments, you simply stare at them. The sergeant quietly walks over. You know, he says softly, I've watched a lot of operators carry those. You look toward him. They all did the same thing. What? They always picked it up one last time. You smile. I guess I just did. He nods. I know. The following morning, a truck arrives. Several armorers begin collecting flamethrowers from every unit. One by one, the heavy steel tanks disappear into the back of the vehicle. When your turn comes, you carry yours over. The armorer checks the serial number, makes a note on his clipboard, then reaches out. I'll take it. You hesitate, only for a second. Then, you hand it over. The weight leaves your hands. The truck drives away. For the first time in many weeks, nothing presses against your shoulders. You instinctively lean forward anyway. Charlie notices. You still walking like you're carrying it. You laugh softly. So are you. He straightens his own back. I guess I am. The sergeant had been right all along. Some burdens remain long after they're gone. As the truck disappears down the muddy road, you roll your shoulders. They feel impossibly light and impossibly heavy at exactly the same time. Ahead of you, the future waits. Not another battlefield, not another cave, not another ridge, just a road leading home. And for the first time since this journey began, you are finally ready to start walking it. The journey home begins quietly. There are no marching orders, no maps spread across ammunition crates, no officers pointing toward another distant ridgeline. Instead, someone simply hands you a set of travel papers. Your name, your unit, your destination. Home. The word feels strangely unfamiliar. You read it twice, then a third time, not because you doubt it, because you've imagined seeing it for so long that it almost doesn't seem real. The trucks carry your company north toward the ports. The roads you fought so hard to capture now look different. Engineers are already rebuilding bridges. Bulldozers push wreckage into neat piles. Telephone crews string fresh wire between poles. The same roads that once carried ammunition toward the front now carry tired soldiers away from it. The island is already beginning to heal. Charlie sits beside you in the back of the truck. He watches the passing countryside. You know, he says quietly, I don't think I'll ever complain about traffic again. You laugh. I was thinking about lawn mowers. Charlie grins. You still thinking about lawn mowers? I am. He shakes his head. I think we're both strange. Probably. The truck continues rolling. Neither of you says much after that. Some conversations no longer require words. When the transport ship finally comes into view, you stop walking. Weeks ago, standing on its deck, you'd stared toward Okinawa with uncertainty. Now, standing on the dock, you look back at the island instead. The green hills seem almost peaceful from a distance. The smoke has mostly disappeared. The thunder of artillery is gone. Only waves quietly lap against the shoreline. It is difficult to believe that such a beautiful place could have witnessed so much suffering. Charlie quietly joins you. You thinking about it? You nod. Yeah. What? You take your time answering. I don't think I'll ever look at a quiet hill the same way again. Charlie doesn't reply. He simply nods. He understands. The voyage across the Pacific feels very different from the trip over. The ship is just as crowded. The engines make the same endless rumble. The ocean stretches just as far in every direction. Yet, everything has changed. The soldiers laugh more often now. Card games return. Someone plays the harmonica every evening. Men begin talking about tomorrow instead of merely surviving today. One afternoon, Charlie unfolds a small notebook. What are you writing? He smiles. A list. Of what? Everything I'm going to eat. You laugh. How long is the list? He turns the notebook around. The page is completely filled. I had a lot of time to think. You read several items aloud. Pancakes, apple pie, roast chicken, milkshakes. He nods proudly. I've done my research. You shake your head. You forgot coffee. He immediately grabs the pencil. Good catch. One evening, as the sun sinks into the Pacific, the older corporal from the voyage to Okinawa quietly joins you at the railing. The same man from Polilio. For several minutes, neither of you speaks. Finally, he looks toward the horizon. You made it. You nod. So did you. He smiles faintly. Told you everything would happen faster than training. You did. He studies your face for a moment. You look older. You laugh softly. I feel older. He nods. That's normal. You hesitate. Does it ever go away? The corporal thinks for a long time before answering. No. He rests both hands on the railing. But it becomes lighter. You aren't entirely sure what he means. Years later, you will. Weeks pass. One ocean becomes another. Eventually, the coastline of home finally appears. At first, only a faint line on the horizon. Then, buildings, harbor cranes, church steeples, smoke rising from factory chimneys. The ship's horn sounds long and deep across the water. Soldiers crowd the rails. Some wave toward people they cannot possibly recognize. Others simply stand silently. Charlie elbows you gently. We're really here. You smile. We are. The dock is crowded. Families, friends, children holding homemade signs, bands playing cheerful music, reporters moving through the crowd. You descend the gangway one careful step at a time. Without the flamethrower, without the rifle, without the endless weight pressing against your shoulders. Walking feels almost unnatural. You keep expecting something heavy to pull you forward. Nothing does. Then, you see them. Your mother first, standing exactly where you'd imagined. One hand covering her mouth, the other waving frantically. Beside her, your father, still wearing work clothes. There is grease beneath his fingernails. He probably came straight from the workshop, exactly as you pictured. For one impossible second, nobody moves. Then your mother begins running. You meet her halfway. She throws both arms around you without saying a word. She simply holds on. Your father reaches you a few seconds later. He doesn't say much either. He simply places one strong hand on your shoulder. I'm glad you're home. 3 simple words. Somehow, they're enough. Several minutes later, Charlie appears nearby with his own family. Across the crowded dock, you catch his eye. He smiles, raises one hand. You wave back. No grand farewell. No dramatic goodbye. Just 2 friends silently wishing each other well. Then, the crowd carries you in different directions. You never know if you'll see him again, but you'll always remember his 21st birthday, his impossible breakfast list, and the way he always walked a few steps behind you, ready to catch 70 pounds of steel if you ever slipped. A few days later, you return to your father's workshop. The familiar smell of machine oil greets you before you even open the door. Rows of bicycles wait patiently for repair. Tools hang neatly from wooden walls. Sunlight pours through dusty windows. Your father hands you a wrench. Think you've forgotten how? You smile. I don't think so. The first bicycle takes longer than it used to. Not because you've forgotten. Because your hands instinctively inspect every bolt twice. Every nut. Every cable, every connection. Your father notices. You've become careful. You quietly tighten the final bolt. I had to. He nods. He doesn't ask why. He already knows. That evening, you walk home beneath a peaceful sunset. Children ride bicycles through the streets. Neighbors wave from their front porches. Somewhere, a lawn mower hums in the distance. You stop walking. Close your eyes. Smile. Weeks ago, You dreamed about hearing that sound again. Now, it is finally real. The world kept turning while you were away. Gardens still grew. Dogs still chased mailmen. Church bells still rang on Sunday mornings. Life continued, exactly as your mother's letters promised. And somehow, that ordinary life feels more extraordinary than any battlefield you have ever crossed. You quietly continue walking toward home, not as the man who left, but as someone who understands something he never appreciated before. Peace is not loud. It does not announce itself with fanfare. It arrives, gently, like the sound of a lawn mower on a warm afternoon, or a father asking for a wrench, or a mother smiling from the front porch. Sometimes, the greatest victories in history are simply being able to come home. Months pass. Summer becomes autumn. Autumn quietly slips into winter. Life settles into a rhythm that once felt ordinary. You wake early, walk to your father's workshop, repair bicycles, tighten chains, replace tires, adjust brakes. Customers come and go throughout the day. Children proudly collect their newly repaired bicycles. Parents thank you with warm smiles. The work is peaceful, predictable, exactly the kind of life you dreamed about while sitting in muddy foxholes on Okinawa. And yet, something still feels different. The first time you hear a car backfire, your entire body reacts before your mind has time to think. Your shoulders tense. Your heartbeat quickens. For the briefest moment, you're standing in the jungle again. Then, the sound disappears. You're back in the workshop. Your father notices. You all right? You nod. Yeah. You don't explain. You aren't sure how. The flamethrower is gone. Returned to the army months ago. Its steel tanks probably sit inside some warehouse now. Or perhaps they've already been dismantled, melted down, turned into something entirely different. You'll never know. Yet strangely, you still feel it. Sometimes while walking home, you unconsciously lean forward, just slightly, as though 70 pounds still rests across your shoulders. Your mother notices one evening. You're back all right. You straighten instinctively. Yeah, just tired. She smiles gently. You've been saying that for months. You smile back, because she's right. One Saturday morning, your father quietly places another bicycle onto the repair stand. You remember this customer? You study the faded blue frame. An older gentleman. Always arrives exactly at 9. Always brings homemade cookies. Always insists on paying even when the repair is tiny. You nod. Of course. Your father begins organizing tools. You know, I've been watching you. You glance toward him. What do you mean? He tightens a loose spoke. You check everything twice now. He points toward the bicycle. Brakes. Bolts. Tires. You never used to. You think about it. He's right. Without realizing it. You've carried military discipline into civilian life. Every machine deserves careful inspection. Every detail matters. Some habits become permanent. One afternoon, a letter arrives. The return address immediately catches your attention. Charlie, you smile before even opening it. Inside, the handwriting is as untidy as ever. Dear friend, asterisk, you'll be happy to know I've finally eaten that breakfast I kept talking about. Asterisk, asterisk eggs, asterisk, asterisk bacon, asterisk, asterisk pancakes, asterisk, asterisk 3 cups of coffee, asterisk, and yes, asterisk pie, asterisk. You laugh aloud. Your mother looks up from the kitchen. What is it? You shake your head. An old friend. She smiles knowingly. You continue reading. Charlie writes about finding work, about helping his father on the family farm, about his little sister dragging him fishing every Sunday morning. Turns out, asterisk, I missed pretending I didn't want to go. Asterisk, you quietly fold the letter. Some promises survive war after all. Years continue passing. The headlines change. Children who once watched soldiers march through town become adults themselves. The world moves forward, as it always does. Occasionally, someone asks about the war. Usually younger people. Curious. Respectful. What was it like? You always pause before answering. How do you explain weeks of rain to someone who has never walked through a jungle? How do you explain carrying 70 pounds every day to someone whose heaviest burden is a suitcase? How do you explain friendship forged beneath artillery fire? Eventually, you simply smile. It was complicated, because every other answer feels too small. One afternoon, many years later, you visit a military museum with your grandson. He's perhaps 10 years old, curious about everything. He runs from display to display, asking endless questions. Then, he suddenly stops. Dad, he points excitedly. No, he corrects himself. Grandpa, you walk over. Behind the glass, resting beneath soft museum lights, sits an M2 flamethrower, almost identical to yours. Twin steel tanks, heavy canvas harness, long metal nozzle. The museum has polished every surface until it shines. Your grandson studies it. Did you ever use one? You look at the familiar machine. For a long time. You don't answer. Finally, yes. His eyes grow wide. Was it heavy? You smile softly. Very. He studies the tanks again. I don't think I could carry that. You gently place one hand on his shoulder. I hope you never have to. The two of you continue walking through the museum. Uniforms, maps, photographs, old helmets, letters home, medals. Visitors quietly move from one display to another. Reading, learning, remembering. Your grandson eventually asks another question. Were you scared? You stop walking. The answer deserves honesty. Every day, he seems surprised. But, I thought soldiers weren't supposed to be scared. You kneel beside him. The brave ones are. They just keep walking anyway. He thinks about that for several seconds, then quietly takes your hand. The two of you continue through the museum together. As you leave, you glance back one final time toward the glass case. The flamethrower remains exactly where it is. Silent, motionless. A museum artifact now. No longer a weapon. No longer someone's burden. Simply a reminder of another time. You smile quietly. History has finally done what history always does. It has taken something once terrifying and transformed it into something meant to be remembered, rather than repeated. Outside, the afternoon sun feels warm on your face. Children ride bicycles through the nearby park. Birds sing from the trees. A gentle breeze carries the smell of fresh-cut grass. You take a slow breath, then another. The weight on your shoulders is finally gone. Not because you've forgotten. You never will. But because you've learned something far more important. The purpose of remembering history is not to carry it forever. It is to pass its lessons gently to those who come after us, so they never have to carry the same weight themselves. Thank you, my weary friends, for joining me on tonight's journey. If you enjoyed spending this quiet evening together, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. I truly enjoy reading every comment. Until next time, I'm Sleepy War Doctor. Sleep well, and good night.